in this first test match, but now we get the opportunity to do something on 5 Live, which is just great fun, where you can go from the peaceful surroundings of Edgbaston at the end of a day's play to the real loud sounds of the engines at the Formula One, because we are just over half an hour away from the start of the Canadian Grand Prix. Full commentary on 5 Live, so let's join Rosanna Tennant in Montreal.
Thank you very much. Yes, welcome to Montreal, where it is a lot drier, still a little chilly, but the torrential rain we've had over the last couple of days has gone, and it looks like we are going to have a dry race here in Montreal. Joining me to talk about the Canadian Grand Prix is American racing driver Oliver Askew and our lead commentator Harry Benjamin. We're in the paddock at the moment, and there's a real buzz, isn't there, for the Canadian Grand Prix, Harry? I think people are looking forward to this race. Max Verstappen on pole, but behind him there's a really jumbled up grid.
It really is. I think it's going to be an exciting one as well. Paddock's busy, pit lane's getting busier and busier as well as we gear up to lights out. It's really grey, overcast, but it's dry as well. So we've had so much wet running all weekend long. So that's going to be another factor that we have to count in for this weekend with dry running this afternoon. But it's a mixed up grid, as you say, Rosanna. But Max Verstappen, once again, always rises to the top. And you have to say, the dominance is one thing, but just the precision from him and the team working together, could be a 100th Grand Prix win for Red Bull come the end of Sunday, a 25th career pole. He could equal the brilliant Ayrton Senna in win numbers. It's exceptional what he's doing, but because he's doing it miles ahead of everybody else, we're not really looking too much at it.
Yeah, you're right. I guess the cameras don't follow him too much during a race. They're trying to find us battles to watch. But, Ollie, as a driver, you're still super confident as Max Verstappen right now, but the conditions changing, how does that affect him, or does it not at all?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that that stat of him, matching Senna and the team Red Bull Racing, potentially reaching their 100th race win this weekend, that's kind of flown under the radar a bit. And I think that's an unbelievable achievement that they're on the brink of. And yes, as you say, Max Verstappen, I mean, he's just a man on a mission. It's almost automatic for him right now, and he makes it look so easy. It just goes to show how much talent he has and how comfortable he is within that team. So, yeah, I don't want to put the commentator's curse on him today, but, unless something crazy happens, it's his race to win.
And of course he thought he was going to be lining up alongside Nico Hülkenberg, but after a penalty was applied for him, now he's got Fernando Alonso. We're just walking through to the pit lane now. Still super busy. The grandstands are packed. Really lovely buzz around the place, and actually a great buzz in Montreal as a whole. The city really embracing Formula One. But yes, now he's got Fernando Alonso alongside him, and that's a little bit more of a challenge, I would say, given what we know about the Spaniard, two-time world champion.
Absolutely, and he is very, very keen to get that Aston Martin back onto the podium again. We know that for sure. As we head out through the tunnel that connects us into the pit lane, and the brightness that comes from, it's not sunny, but it's just incredibly quite bright from all the cloud cover here. And we sort of find ourselves in between the Alfa Romeo garages to our left and the green Aston Martin garages to our right. The grandstand's really getting full up too. And I think, as we find ourselves next to Fernando Alonso, he's going to be a real factor in today's race. But alongside, or just in front of Lewis Hamilton now, because we've had some grid penalties to talk about too since qualifying, it's going to be so interesting going down into turn one. If Alonso can get a really good start. Oliver's been saying it so far this weekend. You can't rule him out for a win, I don't think. It's Fernando Alonso. It's Formula One. Anything can happen, surely.
But then we know that Max Verstappen has it all, he's got it all to lose, but he doesn't really, because if he lets Fernando Alonso take it, he can get him back a few laps later. Surely, Ollie, with that Red Bull car.
Yeah, I mean, unless he has a massive run on the back straightaway with DRS, yeah. Fernando Alonso is not going to make it easy on him. He's a fighter, and when I think he's starting to find that confidence within the team, and on paper, I think he knows that car is really starting to compete with the Red Bull. But he has to look behind him as well, because I think the excitement in this race is going to come from the fight for the final couple of podium positions. And, you know, he has a fierce Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time winner of this Montreal Grand Prix behind him, and as well his teammate George Russell, who could potentially work alongside his teammate Lewis Hamilton to try and fight for those positions.
That's the key, isn't it? They can play cat and mouse, and we're just looking over the grid, which is starting to fill up. The cars are on the grid, the fans are on their feet trying to get a little glimpse of their favourite driver. So many storylines to follow this afternoon. I think the fans are in for an absolute treat. And of course, it is, isn't it? It's Mercedes guys in actually a very strong position today, which at the beginning of this season we really didn't think would be the case.
Yes, and let me just say, this is only my second time to a Formula One race, and now I'm walking down the pit lane, and it's kind of hard for me to focus on what's going on here because my eyes are wandering. It's very exciting, and you know, after following Formula One on TV for so long, it's kind of surreal to be walking around here and feel the energy. The fans here are it's a very special environment.
You're like a kid in a candy store.
A little bit, yeah.
Trying to see how they do it. Obviously, you've got so much experience elsewhere in the motor racing world, but it is quite breathtaking when you do come down, especially at the beginning of a race where everybody's out, all the kit is out of the garages, it's all on the grid, the mechanics bring everything they need down onto the grid just in case there's a problem, they need a spare something, the generators, they're all out there. It's a really impressive spectacle, isn't it, Harry?
It is so exciting. This is my first time trackside as well in Canada, so I was so excited to be here as well. And as you say, it's getting super busy, people darting all over the place in the pit lane. It starts to get really quite compact, and then almost it starts to clear as we then get away for the grid is cleared, and then we'll then get away for the formation lap. But I have to say, it's going to be a fascinating watch, I think, for strategy for this weekend, because we have got this dry running, as I mentioned right at the start of the show, and because we've had the truncated sessions, we've had red flags, we've had deluges of rain and rivers running down onto the surface here in Montreal. This is the first time that all the drivers are going to get some proper long running on the slick tyres. So it really, Ollie, it's a step into the unknown, right?
Yeah, it is, and you know, the water has evaporated overnight. The track is very dusty. Yes, we did have a couple of support series races on this morning, but yeah, this is a condition that's going to be difficult for these drivers. Low grip, high fuel at the beginning of this race, and I think certainly the first quarter is where we're going to see the most action, I can predict.
And what's the challenge? Trying to find those break points you weren't actually able to find on Friday because we had such a short amount of running. What are the actual challenges when you get out on track, when it is so green, so sort of fresh without any rubber?
Yeah, certainly. You're just, as a driver, you're just learning on the fly. And you mentioned those braking points, those references, turn-in points, those all change, and depending on where the rubber is being laid on the track, your line could change as well in a couple of spots.
We've of course got some drivers starting out of position. We've had penalties applied to Carlos Sainz, shunting him back down the grid in the Ferrari. He'll actually now start behind his teammate Charles Leclerc. He'll start from P10. A really difficult day for Scuderia Ferrari. Can they do anything to salvage this, or are they going to get slightly stuck in the midfield?
I think they can.
The midfield battle is fierce, man. It's only covered by a couple of tenths, and once you're stuck in that battle, it's kind of hard to move forward on a track like this with only two overtaking opportunities. That I would say turn 1 and turn 13, heading into the chicane and the Wall of Champions. So. Yeah, I think top speed here, whoever has the top speed advantage in the DRS is going to be able to move forward.
But of course, you might be full sending it. You might find a bit of bravery and launch it somewhere else. And maybe Charles Leclerc will go for that. Maybe he thinks he's got nothing to lose now, given the situation essentially the team has put him in. So a difficult day on the cards for Ferrari. And of course, another difficult day for Checo Perez. Another qualifying session getting away from him. It is just happening time and time again at the moment, Harry, for him. He talked about a restart coming into this weekend. I feel like he needs a restart this afternoon as well for any chance of a championship battle between himself and his teammate Max.
Yeah, well, talk about the midfield squabble. The midfield at the moment is 2 Ferraris and a Red Bull behind a Williams of Alex Albon as well. So Perez has got to get through 2 Ferraris, first of all, who are right in front of him if he wants to try and get himself into the points. It's the third qualifying on the trot where he is not starting in the top 10. And he didn't exactly make inroads in Spain, and we saw in Monaco, well, it was a dreadful time in Monaco, you can't overtake, so he was kind of consigned to being at the back. He needs a good result this weekend. Not that he's under pressure, he's going to lose his seat, but just for his own mentality going for the rest of the season. You know, that gap at the front is so big now. He's not in the championship fight anymore, and that is huge because he was the only one that could have taken it to Max Verstappen until Red Bull maybe might have stepped in later down the line. He's got to show in this race that he can muscle his way through, charge through with the Ferraris. It's a track, as Ollie said, you can overtake on. We've got powerful DRS straights here, especially that long back straight which runs parallel to the basin where they do the canoeing and the rowing for the Olympics here. So it can be done. It's a power circuit, and we know that Red Bull is very powerful and fast in a straight line.
So Checo Perez potentially not just racing for the championship, but maybe also for his seat if he is not going to be up to scratch and able to match his teammate Max Verstappen for the rest of the season. Let's run you through the order then, because we will hear from the drivers very shortly. On pole position, Max Verstappen alongside Fernando Alonso on the front row. Behind them, and it's all Mercedes on the second row. Lewis Hamilton ahead of George Russell. Then Nico Hülkenberg with that penalty down in P5 ahead of Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Lando Norris having a great opportunity to score some points this afternoon in P7 alongside his teammate Oscar Piastri. Then Alex Albon in the Williams, P9. What a chance for them. And he's alongside Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Behind him, his teammate Carlos Sainz. And then it's Checo Perez, as we've been talking about, P12 for the Mexican driver. Then Kevin Magnussen, P13, ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, P14. Pierre Gasly, having been impeded during qualifying, he'll start P15, ahead of Lance Stroll, the home hero, also with a penalty. He's going to need all the help from the fans this afternoon. Then it's Nick de Vries in the AlphaTauri, alongside Logan Sargent in the second Williams. And on the back row of the grid, Yuki Tsunoda with a penalty. He'll start alongside Zhou Guanyu, who also had problems in qualifying. Well, guys, I'm going to send you up to the commentary box, Harry Benjamin and Oliver Askew, so you can get ready to prepare yourselves ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix. And we are going to hear from the drivers now. I have been talking to them with Laura Winter on the Drivers' Parade, and I started by talking to Max Verstappen, our pole sitter for the Canadian Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's a bit different today. There's a lot less rubber than normal on a Sunday, but I'm looking forward to it. It's got to stay dry, and yeah, hopefully we can just have a really good race.
And on the subject of pushing the car, how close are you to extracting the absolute maximum from this car, or are you still holding back a little?
There's no holding back. There's always, things that can be done better, but so far, of course, we are enjoying what we're doing with the car. It's always in a decent window.
I'm joined by Sergio Perez. A tough day yesterday. Sorry for the hard qualifying you had. How will you fight back today? What's possible?
Well, yeah, we will give it all. We will go out there aggressive to try and recover quickly, make the progress, and we got a great car underneath us. So yeah, I look forward for the race. I'm sure it will be a very enjoyable.
We know you can fight back. What's the optimum position do you think you'll reach today?
It's hard, once you are so far behind, in just a couple of laps you are really far behind, but I have a good feeling for today.
Lewis Hamilton, just a word on these fans who have supported you through the years. This is a special place for you, isn't it?
How you doing, Montreal? We've got the greatest crowd here every year. It's always such a great place to be. The city's like more vibrant than it's ever been. I don't know, it really has grown here. Even though we've always had great fans here, it's bigger than ever before. So big thank you to everybody for having us. I'm glad the weather's good for everyone in the crowd and for us today, and I hope we can give them a good race.
Would you have liked a little bit of rain, or are you confident now in the car that you can deliver a podium today?
No, I definitely don't want it to rain. I don't think anyone wants it to rain. So yeah, I think we're on the second row. It's pretty awesome. So big thank you to everyone back at the factory. I really think yeah, this is the closest we can see Max in front of us, so hopefully we can try and tack today.
Good luck, thank you.
Thank you.
And your teammate as well, George Russell, joins me now. Second row, what is the strategy? How will you fight today before your car moves?
What's the strategy?
Strategy from the second row alongside your teammate.
Well, to go forward, but I can't tell you the strategy, that's a secret, but it's going to be an exciting race, lots of opportunity, hopefully fight with Fernando and try and get Lewis and I on the podium.
Where is the fight today? Ahead with the Red Bulls or looking at Alonso?
Alonso, I think Max is out of the question. I think we can stay ahead of the Ferraris, so I think Lewis and I have got a real opportunity to get that double podium.
We shall see. Thanks very much, George.
Lando Norris, P7 for you today. Surely a chance to score some big points.
Yeah, 100%. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a fun race. Our target is to have 2 McLarens in the top 10, so that's our aim.
Good luck with that.
Thank you so much.
Nico, sorry to see you lose that front row yesterday, but P5 is still a decent result for you for a Haas. What's possible today?
Yeah, a bit of a shame, but P5, if someone had told us that on Friday, we would have definitely taken it. So still a very good starting spot for us. Very different circumstances, obviously, today. Not sure what's going to happen, but feel ready and, want to go race.
How will you harness a bit more race pace as well here on a Sunday?
We'll find out. It's a bit of an unknown. Friday, when in the one dry session, I didn't get to run much, but I know my car and I'll give it everything.
Lance, yesterday was difficult for you, but you've got a great car and you've got these guys cheering you on. We like to say it gives you ninth gear, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just so special to be home. Yesterday was a tough day for sure. Not where you want to be starting, but here, you can pass. There's a lot of opportunity today, so I'm looking forward to the race.
Bonne chance. Merci à tous.
Fernando, just a quick word. The front row for you today, just like 2022. What is possible, though, in an Aston Martin, and how will you put the pressure on Max Verstappen?
Yeah, we have more chances this year than last year, for sure. We have more pace in the car, so yeah, let's try to put some pressure on Max. That's going to be difficult. They are, outstanding this year on everything, so it's going to be difficult, but we will try.
How are the upgrades feeling? I guess this will be a good chance to truly test them out after a funny weekend so far.
Yeah, in a way it's a test for us, because FP2 was not enough time to really understand the package, so it's going to be a little bit too many unknowns into the race, but I think it's the same for everybody.
Rosanna Tennant there and Laura Winter speaking to the drivers, and we've made our way back up into the Commons Rocks. Rosanna's now going to make her way from the grid back into the paddock as the grid starts to get cleared out of the way, and we've had to run a little bit all the way down the hallway to get to a 5 Live commentary box. We were right at the end, at the far end of the pit lane, right at the back of the grid. We look out the window, we crane our necks slightly to the left, we can see the Williams gantry and the engineers and strategists getting geared up. A massive grandstand in front of us that is packed to the rafters, overflowing as such, with fans having to get onto the grassy banks either side to get a glimpse onto the main straight. And actually, Oliver, the sun and the blue sky is starting to peek out from behind the grey clouds now. It's dry and you're getting ready for your first Formula One commentary.
This is it, baby. It's showtime. Ready to go.
The pit, how amazing was that? Or being on the grid, in the pit lane, experiencing it all.
Yeah, it was a fantastic moment for us walking down the pit lane, for both of us, this being my second time at an F1 race.
My second time at an F1 race as well.
A couple of rookies in the booth.
Who let that happen?
No, it's very special. There's so much excitement around this day, and the build-up to Sunday here in Formula One has been very special and electric. So looking forward to the start of this race here as we see our helicopter image of the grid. The grandstand's completely packed. As you said, it's a sunny day here, and very much looking forward to this.
Yeah, the grandstands are well and truly packed. Canada is quite a special race on the calendar. It's loved by the drivers in terms of the track layout. 4.3 kilometers, 2.7 miles, 14 turns, great overtaking spots, a long back straight as well, where you can dive in down the inside into the final chicane, the wall of champions to your right, and that brings you back onto the main straight as you head down towards turn 1. Plenty of action, I think, that is going to be on the way, and we'll be guiding you through all of the race coverage right here on BBC Radio 5 Live. But it's now time for the Canadian national anthem with Canadian singer Alicia Moffat.
Oh, Canada, God for thee.
The Canadian national anthem rings out around the circuit. Gilles Villeneuve here. Applause from everybody on the grid and the grandstand to cheer, because they know we are getting oh so close to lights out here in Montreal. And this is how the championship looks right now in the drivers. It is, of course, Max Verstappen who leads by 53 points, his gap to his teammate Sergio Perez. Then it's another 12 points back to Fernando Alonso in third. Lewis Hamilton is is 4th. George Russell rounds out the top 5 in the driver's standings. Over in the constructors, having won every single race so far this year, it's Red Bull Racing who lead by a whopping 135 points. Mercedes, the next challengers now, with 152 points, and now they're only 18 ahead of Aston Martin in what could be set to be a great battle all year long, and they are all very close to each other on the grid as well, with Alonso in 2nd and Hamilton and Russell just behind them as the Canadian officials march off the grid. The blue sky is coming out more and more here in Montreal at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. We're in the Parc Jean Drapeau on the Notre Dame Island, a man-made island in the St. Lawrence River. St. Helens Island is to the northwest of us and artificially enlarged as well for the expo that was here in 1967. We have the biosphere that sits in the background of this Montreal circuit now, often seen on the world feed images that you will get, and now a museum for the environment. So a fantastic location for a Grand Prix, Ollie. And we talked a lot already about Max Verstappen being up front in pole position, but of course his teammate Sergio Perez starts all the way down in 12th with the 2 Ferraris ahead of him.
Yeah, not ideal for both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, teammates being on almost opposite ends of the grid from one another. The Mercedes, on the other hand, both starting within the top 5. We'll see if they're able to work together then to take it to both Fernando Alonso and Max Verstappen. A lot on the line for Max today. As we've mentioned earlier in the show, his 41st win potentially on hand today. The win to match the great Ayrton Senna, and this could be also Red Bull Racing's 100th win. So a story that, in my opinion, has gone under the radar. A lot to look forward to today.
Yeah, lots on the line, actually, for Red Bull. Could be a massive day for them in their history. Lots of Red Bull merchandise in the stands, caps and hats, all being displayed by the fans here. But, of course, Sergio Perez will be starting right behind the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz and the other Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Now, Sainz is down there because of a 3-place grid penalty. Charles Leclerc actually qualified lower than that initially, gets promoted because of his teammates' penalty, because of a disaster in qualifying, choosing the wrong set of tyres at the wrong time. I want to bring in the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson on this, because you were having cappuccinos with the team principal Fred Vasseur this morning, weren't you? What did you learn?
Well, he's a jovial character, Fred Vasseur. He was in a good mood considering he described yesterday as disastrous, and then changed his mind and thought that was maybe too strong a word. Actually, yesterday Charles Leclerc was quite critical of the team's strategy. Fred said that after he'd spoken to the team, he changed his mind and he went back out to Italian television to say, actually, I got it wrong. Because, as Vasseur pointed out, they did do the same strategy as about 95% of the other teams. It doesn't mean it was right. As Alex Albon proved, it was the right decision to go on slicks at the start of Q2. And he ended up in a brilliant performance. He ended up first for Williams at the end of that session as a result of that. I think Leclerc's mood was affected by the fact that Ferrari had what Vasseur said that Leclerc had come to him after Friday and said that was the best the car had felt all year. So they were really hopeful for the weekend, and he had looked quick in all the practice sessions leading up to qualifying. I think he was hoping he might even be on pole. So to end up 11th, and after another disappointment at the end of a season full of disappointment, starting with the reality that they weren't going to challenge for the championship, you can understand why Leclerc reacted in the way that he did. And Vasseur, it wasn't down on him in any way. He was, as I say, he's quite a jovial character, Vasseur, and he was like, this is what you expect of drivers. You want them to be angry when things go wrong, you know?
Certainly so. Well, it was nice of him to offer the cappuccinos out this morning. We didn't quite get the invite for that one, though. Only Andrew did. But the work to do then for Leclerc and Sainz, down 10th, 11th, and Perez just behind them as well. But Ollie, because of the rain that came down in qualifying yesterday and the likes and some big hitters going out early doors, we have a little bit of a jumbled up grid. We've got a Haas of Nico Hülkenberg. Now, Nico initially qualified second on the grid, but gets a 3-place grid penalty for basically not slowing down enough under the red flag. flag that came out in qualifying. He still gets a top 5 start in that Haas. Quite sensational for the German.
Yeah, unfortunately coming into the pits too quickly for the veteran of the sport, so a silly mistake by him and the team, not reminding him of the rules. So the FIA don't mess around in those situations. He got slapped with a penalty, and of course though, very impressed with his run. The opportunity that wet track gave that team was fantastic, and hopefully he can hold onto that position. I think today a win for that team would be to stay within the points, and that's what he's going to be focused on.
Absolutely, as Max Verstappen is getting bolted into his Red Bull. The mechanics just plugging in his water bottle. He sits patiently, gloves ready to be put on as he picks up the right glove and gets to work getting himself ready and in the zone. We talked about Nico Hülkenberg, his teammate Kevin Magnussen, also one that came a cropper in the tricky conditions in qualifying, starts a little bit further back in 13th. But we also have 2 McLarens up into the top 10, with Lando Norris in 7th and Oscar Piastri in 8th. Big crash for Oscar Piastri in Q3. His first big crash in his rookie season, really. He said it was always going to come at some point, but he still gets a top 8 start there. So watch out for the 2 McLarens and see how long they can hang on for in that top 10. Andrew.
So I was speaking to McLaren this morning. They're actually worried about Alex Albon. They think the upgrade on the Williams that they've introduced this weekend, only on Albon's car actually, has been really impressive, and they think he's going to be quicker than them in the race. And they don't think they've got the pace of Alpine with Esteban Ocon directly ahead of Lando Norris in 6th place. So for them, it's almost a case of looking backwards rather than forwards. Or everyone says they always look forwards, but with the McLarens, you've got on the grid, you've got Norris and Piastri, then Albon right behind them, and then right behind him, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, 2 Ferraris and a Red Bull. I think McLaren are going to struggle to stay in the points.
Well, it's going to be certainly something to keep an eye on. We'll be having the full race coverage right here on BBC Radio 5 Live as we gear up to 2 o'clock local time. But now it's time for the latest news with Dina Campbell.
Formula One on 5 Live.
Welcome back to Montreal. We're here for the Canadian Grand Prix at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for the 8th race of the Formula One season. We're in the city of Montreal in the Parc Jean Drapeau on the Notre Dame Island, a man-made island in the middle of the St. Lawrence River. It's a spectacular venue for the Canadian Grand Prix. The grandstands are absolutely packed, people overflowing onto the grassy banks that overlook the main straight that we can see directly outside of our commentary box. Outside of us, we overlook the pit lane, the Williams gantry on the pit wall to our right, and the engineers and strategists all sat, arms crossed, and getting ready for lights out, which is less than 5 minutes away. And starting on pole position will be Max Verstappen, just in front of Fernando Alonso. The row behind will be Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. It is an all-star first 2 rows, really. And to guide you through all the coverage, the 70 laps that we await to get, will be myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the American racing driver Oliver Askew and the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. And Ollie, this is your first F1 commentary here with trackside in Canada. What have you made of the experience so far, and how impressed are you once again by Max Verstappen and Red Bull?
I love it. I think this is a fantastic first race for me to call, as we've had a very jumbled up qualifying grid, as it was wet yesterday, as we see on our images. Nico Hülkenberg starting in 5th place, so it's going to be exciting how the faster cars starting around him fare. And I've had a great time this week so far. I think only the best is yet to come in this race here, as we see the sunshine has finally come out this weekend, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
And Andrew Benson, a quick word before we get going, as we see the tyre warmers being taken off of the tyres on the grid. Not much dry running so far this weekend, so really it's a step into the unknown for a lot of our drivers.
A little bit. There was some dry practice on Friday before the rain came, and actually obviously Verstappen was the quickest, as he always is, but Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari was almost exactly on his same pace, just half a tenth behind him. So that's why Ferrari was so disappointed yesterday to be down and knocked out in Q2 for Leclerc. And Sainz has a 3-place grid penalty, so starts 1 place behind him in 11th. So I think we can see the Ferraris coming through, and then what's going to happen at the front.
Well, it is nearly time for the Canadian Grand Prix. Well, taking his 25th career pole, it is Max Verstappen who starts from the P1 in the Red Bull racing car. Alongside him will be the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso. Then, row 2, the man who's won here 7 times, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, next to his teammate George Russell. Nico Hülkenberg qualified on the front row, but a 3-place grid drop sees his Haas down into 5th, just in front of the Esteban Ocon Alpine. Then it's the 2 McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in 7th and 8th. Alex Albon top Q2 in the mixed conditions, starts 9th for today's Grand Prix. And the Williams in front of Charles Leclerc, who missed out on a Q3 taking part, but he still gets the top 10 start in front of his teammate Carlos Sainz. And the other Ferrari, a 3-place grid penalty for impeding. Then it's Sergio Perez, 3rd race on the trot. He has not made it inside the top 10. He goes from 12th in his Red Bull, ahead of Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. Then it's Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, in front of Pierre Gasly, who was not happy after qualifying. He starts in 15th, in front of the home hero Lance Stroll in his Aston Martin, with a 3-place grid penalty as well for impeding. He goes ahead of the AlphaTauri of Nick De Vries, the Williams of Logan Sargent. Yuki Tsunoda lines up in 19th after a 3-place grid penalty shock for impeding, and Zhou Guanyu starts last after issues in qualifying from 20th. Well, as they get underway for their formation lap, there's also US Open golf action coming up with Ian Carter and the team in LA. Ricky Fowler and Wyndham Clark lead, with Rory McIlroy heading into the final round, 1 shot behind. That follows us later this evening on 5 Live at 10 o'clock. Elsewhere, reaction analysis after day 3 of the first Ashes Test. England v Australia, where rain stopped play with England leading Australia by 35 runs with 8 wickets remaining. You can check out the TMS podcast and the BBC Sport website and app for further reaction. Right now, though, as Max Verstappen peels on to the starting grid, this is the sound of Charles Leclerc further back, starting 10th in that Ferrari, getting tyres up to speed, up to temperature, and they pull into their grid spots.
Yeah, and speaking of tyres, the top 11 all electing to go on the medium compound, where Sergio Perez, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas, 12th, 13th, and 14th starting on the hards. And then we have Pierre Gasly on the soft tire. Everyone else from 16th on back on the medium compound tire. So final cars heading into their positions.
They certainly are. We didn't really think anyone would run the soft wall tyre, the red wall tyre, but Pierre Gasly is the only driver on that, hoping for a quick start off the line and to make up as many positions as he can in the early stages of this race. Down in 15th he will start. As we await for the green flag to fly at the back of the pack. Underneath the sun here in Canada, Max Verstappen is on pole, and it's all lights to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing in Canada. And it's a sublime start from Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton behind, who immediately gets up and past Fernando Alonso, who is under pressure here from the second Mercedes, who swoops round the outside of turn 2 as they now go 2 by 2, making their way into turn 3, kicking up the dust as some cars go offline. Safely through 3 and 4 though for Max Verstappen, who leads from Lewis Hamilton, and Fernando Alonso has stabilised in that Aston Martin in front of George Russell. Then comes the Alpine of Esteban Ocon and Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, who was fighting with the McLaren of Lando Norris, who lines astern with his teammate Oscar Piastri, who's actually got the jump on him. Further back in the pack though, as we rush underneath the trees and the sun spreads even further around this track, it's Ferrari versus Red Bull further back in the pack, and it's Leclerc versus Carlos Sainz and the Sergio Perez Red Bull, all embroiled in a battle as they come into the hairpin, and it's the Red Bull on the inside, Perez getting through. I think that was on Carlos Sainz as he now peels out into the traction zone, down the back straight with the basin to the left-hand side where the rowing was held many years ago for the Olympics. The Sergio Perez Red Bull gets in front, but now it's side by side with the Ferrari down into the final chicane. The Ferrari gets back through. The Haas, though, gets its braking wrong just behind of Kevin Magnussen, has to dart to the left onto the grass, manages to avoid any contact. A slight skirmish with the wall cuts across the runoff area, and that is the end of the first lap, Oliver Askew.
Yeah, fairly clean first lap by everyone out there. I have to say, Lewis Hamilton from the clean side of the grid, fantastic start, getting back, up into second position past Fernando Alonso. He said before this race he feels like this has been his best chance this year to take the fight to Red Bull.
It certainly has. Further back in the pack, Pierre Gasly on that soft tyre of the Alpine has made up a couple of spots. He's up into 13th ahead of Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. It was Kevin Magnussen who had the scary moment further back in the pack. He's still out there running though, down in 15th. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who's made up a spot from his starting position. He's up into 9th and chasing down the back of the McLaren of Lando Norris as he brakes and goes down through the gears, makes the 180-degree right-hand corner of the hairpin into the traction zone, and now chases after the McLaren. After Leclerc, it's Albon, Sainz, and then Perez in 12th.
Yeah, Pierre Gasly, one of the most heated drivers after yesterday's qualifying, after being impeded. Started 13th, now up a couple of spots into 10th, I believe, on that soft compound tire. So, making headway here early.
As we start lap 3 of 70 here in Canada, Max Verstappen leads Lewis Hamilton, and Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin is 3rd. George Russell is 4th in front of Esteban Ocon, who rounds out the top 5. Then it's Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, the 2 McLarens, Piastri and then Norris in 8th. Leclerc 9th. Albon rounds out the top 10. Sainz, Perez, Gasly, Stroll, Magnussen the top 15. Bottas, De Vries, Sargent, Zhou Guanyu and Yuki Tsunoda has been into the pit lane, I believe. He's 20th and last.
Now looking at the replay here of the start, 2 by 2 for most of the drivers through turn 1 and 2. Still continuing side by side, Fernando Alonso and George Russell fighting it out for that 3rd position. On board here with Sergio Perez starting in 12th position, making up a couple of spots here so far, heading into turn 1, out braking. Yes, 2 by 2. Continuing through the first sector here for Sergio Perez on the opening lap.
Yeah, Sergio Perez kind of found himself a little bit squeezed on the inside of the apex of turn 2, the right-hander that then brings you onto a short straight before we get into the quick right-hander of turn 3 and 4. Kevin Magnussen, though, while he had a little bit of a moment down the back straight.
Yeah, on board with him now. He did a good job of taking evasive action, almost running into the back of the Red Bull of Sergio Perez, and taking that runoff through the chicane and the Wall of Champions. No harm, no foul.
Fernando Alonso has just set the fastest lap of the race so far. He's 8/10 behind Lewis Hamilton. DRS is available. The rear wing flap will slide open in the allocated zones as long as you are within a second of the car in front, and that can give you near about 8/10 advantage over the car in front. However, we could well see some DRS trains if we find that midfield pack super competitive. Quite impressed so far out there with Oscar Piastri, the Australian rookie who started behind his teammate had a big crash in Q3, managed to get out there and has so far got in front of Norris. Here's Russell though.
Give me feedback on strategy, it's up. So currently still plan A, so we just need to stay with Alonso, let's not let him get away from us.
Yeah, on board there with Alonso, he actually clipped the wall coming out of turn 4. Has still continued and is putting pressure on Lewis Hamilton, so just absolutely pushing the limits.
So Verstappen then has a 1.5 second gap as we come across for lap number 5 of 70 here in Canada. Lewis Hamilton still keeping him honest, but then Fernando Alonso in 3rd, and we just heard George Russell on the radio there behind Alonso in 4th, trying to keep tabs on the 2-time champion in front of him. Nico Hülkenberg has stabilised in 6th. He's just over a second back from Esteban Ocon in the first of the Alpines, who's up in 5th. Then it's Piastri 7th, Norris 8th, Leclerc up in 9th, and Albon rounds out the point scorers.
So Harry, Hülkenberg's already proving to be a bit of a roadblock in 6th place. He's got from Piastri right down to De Vries in 17th behind him, with not more than half a second really between all of those cars. Leclerc is right up behind Lando Norris, has been for a couple of laps now, trying to get by. So that's where the action's going to come. While we watch, mind you, I say that, but Fernando Alonso is right up behind Lewis Hamilton as they head onto the back straight.
Yeah, this is going to be an absolutely classic fight here between two extremely experienced and accomplished drivers in Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, as we see Fernando Alonso putting pressure on Lewis going through with the Wall of Champions chicane. With the DRS open, he'll have another shot here into turn 1.
2 heavyweights going toe-to-toe at the front. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc, though, into the braking zone that meets the right-left chicane and the Wall of Champions to your right, turns 13 and 14 that bring you onto the main straight. Charles Leclerc chasing down Lando Norris with DRS, unable to get past him as he now breaks into the left-hander together, which then immediately becomes the sweeping right-hander, a Senna-esque curve, if you will, here in Montreal for Leclerc to negotiate to try and get up to the back of Norris. But you're absolutely right. Fernando Alonso is very much keeping Lewis Hamilton within his sights for the final podium positions. The gap between Hamilton and Verstappen, though, is about 2 seconds at the moment, just dipped under that. So Hamilton's still there, but he, crucially, will not have DRS. Alonso, who is only about 4 tenths behind Hamilton, will have DRS. That leaves Lewis Hamilton exposed.
And DRS can give you a slightly deceptive view of relative pace because it's an 0.8 of a second lap time advantage. So that's really good for Alonso. And what it doesn't mean he's necessarily absolutely faster than Hamilton. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that battle plays out.
Yeah, and this is the sound of Fernando Alonso. Then down the main straight with the DRS open, the rear wing flap open on the rear of that car, then immediately shuts underneath the braking and negotiates the Wall of Champions chicane in that Aston Martin with the black silver arrow of the Mercedes in front of him. Lewis Hamilton holds on for the time being as we now head back into the right-hander of turn 2. It's Hamilton in second, Alonso in third. Here's our leader, Verstappen.
I think tires are more vulnerable than FP2.
Understood.
So he thinks the tyres are more vulnerable than FP2. We got a little bit of dry running in FP2, but that's what we were kind of mentioning right at the start of the coverage. This is the first time in anger that a lot of these drivers will be able to see exactly what these slick tyres can do. Max Verstappen and the majority of the field on the medium compound of tyre. Those on the hard are way down the field. They're trying to go as long as they can into this race. They're going to be hoping for some kind of interference, whether that may be through a safety car or other means. And those runners are Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, along with Yuki Tsunoda, who's already had an early pit stop. So we've got a yellow flag in sector 2. Here's Sargent.
Stop the car, park next to marshal post, critical message.
Sounds like Logan Sargent then in trouble and may well be out of this race, and the reason for the yellow flag. Back up though in the midpoint squabble, Oscar Piastri has been hunting down the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg and managed to make it through. Next up is Lando Norris, who wants to try and find a way past the Haas down into the final chicane. He can't quite do it with the added addition of DRS because Hülkenberg has also got DRS now down into turn 1, and Hülkenberg can breathe a slight sense of relief as he slows dramatically under the virtual safety car, which is now out to deal with Logan Sargent's stricken Williams. He actually slowed so much that I think it caught Lando Norris by surprise a little bit as they headed into the right-hander of turn 2. Norris just having to do a little bit of avoiding action and put that McLaren up onto the curb.
Yeah, and as we see Logan Sargent, his car being rolled back behind the barricades. He's out of the car and okay. No contact to that car as far as I know. It sounds like a engine or a technical issue that team has spotted via their data. So here's a replay with him. We're on board with Logan.
Up through the gears into the right-hander that then approaches turn number 6, and he just loses power.
Everything sounded okay until he was told to shut off the car. So maybe that team seeing a potential problem that could turn into a catastrophe and maybe an engine penalty later on in the season. So probably a good catch by them.
So that is our first driver then out of this race. 19 runners remain. Logan Sargent is out in that Williams. A real shame for the American rookie from Fort Lauderdale. Virtual safety car then over as they've cleared that Williams away. Verstappen leads, DRS enabled, and this is the sound of Charles Leclerc downshifting through the gears, rides the curbs that take you through the final chicane. He's right onto the back of Lando Norris in the McLaren, who also have DRS, and then it's Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas ahead of them. So this is the battle between 7th, 8th and 9th as Oscar Piastri managed to get through and is now starting to put a little bit of distance between himself and those he was fighting with.
Yeah, and the track is obviously dry now. Lots of water being evaporated overnight and very low grip for these drivers. We also have more sun, so more track temperature during this race, and with less grip becomes a less durable Pirelli tire.
We're already seeing a number of separate races developing here. One is Max Verstappen on his own. He's 3 seconds ahead of Hamilton, who's got Alonso and Russell right behind him. Then there's a 4-second gap back to Ocon, with Piastri now trying to close in on him, and then Hülkenberg is holding up most of the rest of the field in 7th place, with Leclerc in 9th trying to get past Norris but in 8th, but held up by the fact that it's a DRS train.
We always suspected that Nico Hulkenberg might be the cork in the bottle, but he's holding his own at the moment in 7th in that Haas. Was on course to start 2nd, but a infringement under the red flag conditions in qualifying saw him drop 3 places. He started in 5th. The Haas is now down into 7th, keeping Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc at bay for the time being. And now talking about separate races developing, this one is still absolutely going on as the St. Lawrence River, which surrounds this man-made island that we're on, engulfs the track. Oscar Piastri, we're just seeing the way he got through Nico Hulkenberg down into turn 1 and then had the inside for the right-hander of turn 2. Nice move for the Aussie, but it's 2nd, 3rd and 4th we are focusing on at the moment. It's Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, and George Russell in the other Mercedes, all separated by just a few car lengths. Alonso has fallen slightly back into the clutches of George Russell as they now run to the approach of the right-hand hairpin of turn 10.
Yeah, I think Alonso realizes that at this stage in the race, Lewis Hamilton has just enough pace to keep him behind, potentially, falling back slightly, trying to get some more air over the Aston Martin wings, and is playing the long game here. It seems like he's very strong through sector 3, through that turn 10 hairpin, very deep on the brakes, and I think if he's going to end up around Lewis Hamilton, it's going to be through DRS into the Wall of Champions chicane.
Lap 11 of 70, Verstappen leads by 3.5 seconds. Lewis Hamilton is 2nd. Fernando Alonso rounds out the top 3 with George Russell engulfed in that final podium battle for the time being. Then there's a bit of a gap, 5 seconds or so, to Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, who's a little bit of no man's land, because then comes Oscar Piastri in the McLaren in 6th. And then it's Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas in 7th, who is keeping everybody else behind him. Lando Norris in the McLaren, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is in 9th, and Alex Albon still holding on in front of Carlos Sainz into 10th position. Then it's Perez in 12th, Stroll, Magnussen, Bottas the top 15, De Vries, Zhou, Tsunoda in 18th. Pierre Gasly has just come into the pits. He was on the soft compounder tyre. He's now fallen back down to 19th as last.
So I was hearing from a strategist before the race that if someone picked a soft tyre at the start, they were only going to run it for a few laps and then they would do it. The strategy is to then get yourself some free air to run at your own pace. Gasly thinks the Alpine's a quick car, so now he's done that. He's taken that stop. I don't know what tyre he's going to change onto. Let's have a quick look at the thing. Hard tyre. So he's now going to go run long and try and make up some spaces.
I think I hit a bird.
Understood.
That was Max Verstappen thinking his Red Bull may have made contact with some of the wildlife here. It is well known for the wildlife around here. Birds and groundhogs all located around the track. A move going on, which then doesn't really become a move down into the chicane. Lando Norris was on the inside of the Haas of Nico Hulkenberg, was about to make the move stick, but then the Haas peeled straight off into the pit. So Hulkenberg is in. Piastri is in 6th. Then it's Norris now through to 7th. Under pressure, though, in that McLaren straight away from the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Then comes Alex Albon. Then it's Carlos Sainz now into the top 10. But it's the battle for 7th that is raging on. Norris, Leclerc, Albon.
Yeah, quite a funny moment there between Lando Norris and Nico Hulkenberg. Norris going to the inside through the final chicane, and then all of a sudden Nico goes accelerating around the outside and catches Norris off guard. Oh, and we see George Russell.
George Russell has had some sort of contact with the wall, and he has lost the entire right-hand side of his front wing. He's made contact with the rear of that Mercedes as well. The right rear tyre is completely deflated. That has brought out a safety car as they roll down into the hairpin. Big damage onto that Mercedes.
Verstappen's in the pits. I'm sure Hamilton and Alonso will probably follow him in, or will they? Let's find out.
Let's find out. Max Verstappen is first into the pits. Lewis Hamilton does indeed follow, as does Fernando Alonso. Huge impact on this race here. George Russell with a huge amount of impact on that Mercedes. It's a nice quick stop down at Red Bull. 2.3 seconds to get that Max Verstappen car back out onto the track. It's a little slower down at Mercedes though for Lewis Hamilton. Lost a second, and it's had a bit of an unsafe release though, because Fernando Alonso had come out right behind the Mercedes. The gap, mere millimetres between the Mercedes and the Aston Martin. The Mercedes in front, Alonso just behind.
So the Ferraris have not pitted, neither has Sergio Perez. Perez, it makes sense, is on the hard tyre. Ferrari are gambling. Again, it's about track position and using their pace. They were getting frustrated behind Norris with Leclerc. How's that going to play out for them?
Yeah, other pitters include Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, Piastri, both McLarens, along with Norris has Albon too. This is the sound of George Russell. Let's see what happens then into the braking zone of turn 8.
Oh, he just gets high-sided on the second apex curve, the sausage curve there, completely loses his steering. As we see from this camera angle, yes, just smashes the right rear into the wall and it's game over.
Yeah, and that was coming to the right-hander of 8, and the wall then is on the exit of 9. Here's what he says.
I'm out, guys, sorry. Copy. Sorry.
George Russell then out of this race, the second retirement for this season for the British racer. We're just having another look at what happened in the pits as well between Mercedes and Aston Martin.
You're just ahead, just ahead. Break up with the stop, guys.
And this is the sound of Fernando Alonso, and I think he might have something to play.
You had to brake there, yeah, it looked pretty dangerous to me.
Well, what did you make of that? Was that an unsafe release? Because
I don't
Mercedes
think so.
Released right into the path of that.
I don't think that was unsafe. It looked to me like Fernando Alonso was trying to sell an unsafe release and by moving and swerving down on the pit lane. So I'll have to get a closer look at that, maybe see some data.
George Russell might not be out of this race. He has made it back to the pits. The mechanics have gone to work on all 4 sides of that tyre. They're having a real look at the right rear of that car, but they're saying no. And actually, they're not saying no. One of them did cross his arms, but the others have then said no, good to go, let's go. George Russell peels out of the pits. He weaves the car slightly from left to right as he makes his way out, up through the gears. George Russell in that Mercedes, he's had a pit stop and he's come out on the hard compounded tyre, and he is back out into this race. Meanwhile, his teammate under investigation for the pit lane incident between himself and Fernando Alonso. Will that be an unsafe release? Well, it's now in the steward's hands. We are still under safety car conditions. You're listening to live coverage of the Canadian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. We are on lap 14 of 70. Max Verstappen leads, but we have had a safety car after George Russell in the Mercedes found the wall. By some kind of miracle, he's made it back to the pits. They've changed the tyres, had a look at the rear end of that car, which took huge contact to the wall on the exit of turn 9, a fast left-hander that approaches the hairpin here in Canada, but he is back out onto the track with a change of tyres. So the ones that didn't pit are the 2 Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. They have now shuffled up into 4th and 5th. Sergio Perez right behind them. He's on the hard compounded tyre. That's where he started. He has not pitted. He is up into 6th place. Let's give you a rundown of the order just so everyone's clear. Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, the top 3. Leclerc, Sainz, the top 5. Perez, Magnussen, who also didn't pit, along with Bottas, have found themselves in 7th and 8th. Ocon, Piastri, the top 10. Then it's Norris, Albon, Tsunoda, Zhou Guanyu, Nico Hülkenberg is 15th, Stroll, De Vries, Gasly, Russell 19th and last.
And just feedback on the car.
It's a bit bent, but I think it's okay.
Well, it's a bit bent, but it's okay for George Russell, who, this is the sound you're hearing on board with the British racer who makes his way through the right-hand kink of 5. That is that's quite amazing, Andrew. They've got that car back out there.
I'm astonished, just as Ollie. I can't believe that car's still running. He hit the wall. It was a pretty big hit. We saw bits flying off the car. The wall's damaged. There's wheel imprints on the wall. I don't know how bent it is. Here's Hamilton.
Where does the damage come from?
That is off George's car, we believe.
Okay, so he's talking about the damaged bits on the track, I think, by the sounds of that. Meanwhile, the decision not to pit for Ferrari has put Leclerc and Sainz in 4th and 5th places ahead of Perez on the harder tyre in 6th. Now, the reason the hard tyre was expected to be the favoured tyre for this race and why everybody in the field now is on it, apart from those 2 Ferraris, is because it was prone to graining. So the problem is they might find that people behind them on hard tyres could potentially challenge them or at least match them. Verstappen, Hamilton and Alonso on the hard tyre are definitely going to pull away from them. How long can Leclerc and Sainz make those medium tyres last? They'll be on an offset strategy compared to everybody else. Is this going to bring them into play for the podium positions, or is it going to actually harm them? We have to wait and see.
I also wonder, somebody else to watch is Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, who's down in 13th. Now, he was plumb last after the first lap because he came into the pits to switch straight away onto the hard compound of tyre. under safety car conditions now, without coming into the pits, he's shuffled up into 13th. So we'll see and keep an eye on if that manages to benefit Tsunoda and the AlphaTauri strategy at all, if he can now do a bit of tyre saving underneath these conditions. But it is indeed safety car conditions here in Canada. Lewis Hamilton dropping quite a bit back from Verstappen.
Comment from Tsunoda regarding the hards. Warm-up was worse than expected, around 1 second, so we are expecting the cars in front to struggle initially.
So Ferrari, like me, are also watching Yuki Tsunoda there and seeing what he makes of the hards. He was the first person to switch onto them as a new tyre. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton just heading down the back straight now and getting heat into his tyres.
That radio message was saying attack at the restart, because your tyres are going to be hotter than the Mercedes tyres in front of you, and they're going to need to do that, because I think once the hard tyres come in, the Ferraris are going to start to struggle.
Safety car still out then, so we'll have another lap or so behind you. I think there was a lot of damage to that wall in turn 9, so they're going to have to be checking that out to see how much of that they might either be able to repair or replace.
Yeah, and Lewis on the previous radio message just wondering and making sure that that damage wasn't coming off his car, because maybe he saw black Mercedes bodywork scattered across the track. So, man, I'm still in shock at how George Russell has continued this race. Surely there's some kind of bent parts on that car now. We'll see where his lap times fall as we go green here.
Well, we'll see in anger how well he can do. He's down in 19th now, the last of the runners. Logan Sargent in the Williams is out of this race. This is the sound of Sergio Perez at the start of this race, up through the gears and down into the left-hander, who was embroiled in a great fight with Carlos Sainz in the second of the Ferraris, and Sainz really getting his elbows out, going into the right-hander of 8, where George Russell then found the wall and the reason for the safety car, and in the end Perez was able to continue that battle and win it. But Sainz down the back straight, who you can hear now, through with DRS round the outside and into the final chicane in that Scarlet Red Ferrari, made his way through. So safety car coming in at the end of this lap as we celebrate 50 years of the safety car. Max Verstappen will now take over control of this race. Hamilton behind, Alonso third, Leclerc, Sainz the top 5, Perez, Magnussen, Bottas, Ocon, Piastri the top 10. And he slows right down, does Verstappen. He's weaving left to right down the back straight, which runs parallel to the Olympic basin, a huge rectangular basin created for the rowing and canoeing here in Montreal in the 1976 Summer Olympics. The sun that was out at the start of this race has just been covered slightly by a bit of grey cloud, but it's still in the distance. It is fairly hot as well. When will Verstappen go? That is the question. He is trawling through into the chicane, and I think he has floored it. He goes through the right-hander, then to the left, the wall of champions to his right, and his foot to the floor for Max Verstappen, who makes a great start as we get back under green flag running here in the Canadian Grand Prix. Hamilton is second, but he is under pressure from Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. They are nose to tail, along with Charles Leclerc, who has been told to attack on these medium tyres, along with his teammate Carlos Sainz. They are the only two on the mediums in the top 6 and have not pitted under the safety car conditions, along with Sergio Perez, who runs 6th on the hard compound of tyre. Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, Leclerc, Sainz the top 5, Perez, Magnussen, Bottas, Ocon, Piastri the top 10.
Kevin Magnussen benefiting massively from that last safety car period, one of the earlier cars to pit. So yeah, he's certainly undercut a few there running in P7.
Except, Ollie, we had a message on the screen. Magnussen, Bottas and Ocon running in 7th, 8th and 9th places now are all under investigation for potentially overtaking while the safety car was out, so they could be in some trouble.
Yeah, usually if you overtake onto a safety car and that's the accusation, it's usually pretty slam dunk, but we'll keep you abreast on that. Nothing coming up on our race control screen as an outlet for that. Pit lane incident involving Norris has been noted for an unsafe release as well. So lots of action going on in the pits. Speaking of Norris, the two McLarens are embroiled in a great fight along with the Williams. Norris ahead of teammate Piastri in 10th. Piastri trying to find a way through. He's in the middle of this sandwich as they head on to the main straight and dive down into turn one. Piastri is all over the back of Lando Norris. He tries to sling it down the inside. Norris defends nicely, and the Williams of Alex Albon just watching on behind, waiting to make his move if the two McLarens falter, as we race our way now through the trees and underneath the short bridge that runs over several parts of this track. The right-hander kink awaits you before you then get into the braking zone of turn 6.
Yeah, surely Oscar doesn't want to make any silly moves on his veteran teammate Lando Norris, as we see here on board with Lando. Oscar, though, sometimes the best defense against Alex Albon behind is an offense. So as we see Lando going on the inside of turn 10, that's how he got around Oscar Piastri. Easy, textbook overtake.
Down the inside into the hairpin and up through the gears on exit, down the back straight, and that was how Norris made his move on his teammate Piastri. Pit lane incident involving Hamilton and Alonso was noted, now under investigation for an unsafe release, and that sounds like there may well be a penalty coming Lewis Hamilton and that Mercedes team's way.
Yeah, of all the unsafe releases that we saw on that pit lane exchange, I don't think Lewis's release was the worst of those. I'd be surprised if you get a penalty for that.
Lap 19 of 17 here in Canada. Max Verstappen leads by 1.6 seconds, and he has just set the fastest lap in that Red Bull. He is looking to take the win and make it 100 Grand Prix wins for that Red Bull Racing team. He's still got some way to go, though, but he's had it in hand so far. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari into the braking zone of the right hand of the 180-degree full lock hairpin, locking up that front right tyre. He's on the medium compound tyres, has been since the start of this race. They've now been running for about 19 laps as DRS then becomes enabled. Leclerc and Sainz running toe-to-toe right now in sequence around this circuit Gilles Villeneuve.
Yeah, those small locks of the front tyre on entry is certainly not going to help the longevity of that medium compound tyre, as we see both Ferraris running line astern in 4th and 5th.
And work being done then on the Ferrari pit wall to try and see where their strategy is going to take them. They are still quite close to each other on track, actually, so this could develop into a nice little battle between the two Ferraris, but that midfield pack two spicing up nicely. The two McLarens are still fighting, and in his defence of the Williams behind, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren has to cut the final chicane, and that as Lando Norris actually has to cut the final chicane as Albon has managed to get in front of Piastri.
Yeah, that was Oscar Piastri locking up on entry to the final chicane, having to go wide through the runoff, and that just gave a chance to Alex Albon, who we believe has the faster car with those upgrades on the Williams this weekend.
That's the voice of the American racing driver Oliver Askew, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. Also joining us in the commentary box is the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. And as the two McLarens were battling further back in the pack, it was Oscar Piastri making a mistake, locking up coming into the final chicane at the end of the long back straight and having to cut the corner, and that allowed Albon in the Williams to swoop past the Williams that is running new upgrades this weekend.
Okay, Kev, we need to drop a place back behind Ocon. We need to drop back behind Ocon. So safety car, lane exit infringement.
Okay. So that's Kevin Magnussen being told he needs to drop a position to Ocon, which he has already done, and now he is coming under pressure from the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, which makes it look easy down the back straight with the rear wing flying open, DRS, but has a little bit of a compromised line coming out of the final chicane. That allows the Haas to squeeze right up onto the back of Bottas, and Lando Norris in the McLaren wants to go on this as well. He's going to go round the outside of Norris into turn one. That becomes the inside, and Magnussen loses 2 positions in just 2 corners. Magnussen down to 10th, Norris 9th, Bottas in 8th. This midfield pack is absolutely marvellous to behold, because we also got Albon battling in it as well in the Williams. He's 11th, Piastri is 12th, and then comes Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri in 13th.
Yeah, very heads-up driving there by Lando Norris. He knew that Kevin Magnussen was then going to have the dirty air of Valtteri Bottas in front through the apex. So, allowing his car to run the outside in the clean air with that extra grip, textbook pass, and then he has the inside for the turn 2.
Points go down to the top 10 in Formula One, and right now it's Kevin Magnussen who holds that 10th position and that final points paying position. But in that Haas, which has not pitted yet, he is coming under pressure from Albon and Piastri in 11th and 12th. Further back up, let's check in on our leader, shall we? Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, over 2 seconds the gap he has in hand to Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso in third. Leclerc and Sainz and Perez yet to pit all occupy 4th, 5th and 6th. Then it's Ocon in 7th, Bottas 8th, Norris 9th, Magnussen 10th.
So, Andrew, it sounds like that was a pit exit infringement by those drivers that were noted by the stewards. Kevin Magnussen, I believe, having to give that position back. Explain that.
Yeah, so there's only certain parts of the track that you're allowed to overtake on, and obviously it's turned out that what Magnussen's done is overtaken a place in the pit lane where you're not allowed to overtake. There's a certain point beyond which you can overtake in the pit lane. He's obviously got a little bit greedy as he was coming out after when everybody stopped, or when most people stopped, I should say, under that safety car period. Bottas and Ocon, who were also under investigation, have got away with it. We're still waiting to hear on the other 2 investigations, which are unsafe releases involving Hamilton ahead of Alonso and Lando Norris in the McLaren.
Yeah, nothing come through on our race control screens just yet about the results from those decisions. So the race stewards are busy with that right now. Busy on track is Fernando Alonso. That's the sound you hear on the back straight, down the inside of Lewis Hamilton into the final chicane, and gets the move done on the 7-time champion. But Lewis Hamilton is going to try and come back at him in the black Silver Arrow, the Mercedes. He doesn't have DRS, Alonso does. He tries to find a way around the outside. Alonso defends through into the left-hander of turn 1. That comes the sweeping right-hander. Alonso has made the move stick and is up into 2nd. Hamilton down to 3rd.
Yeah, that move was a long time coming there, heading into the Wall of Champions chicane, turn 13. DRS open, had a huge run on the back of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. And yeah, a couple laps prior, he was backing out of it. Didn't feel like he was close enough, as we see a replay here. But this time, straight to the inside. Got the car slowed down well on the inside of the track and on the dirty part of the track. And yeah, very decisive overtake there by Fernando.
Same move being done for Alex Albon, but not with the finesse as Fernando Alonso managed to do it. He was trying to go down the inside of Kevin Magnussen to get that final 10th place spot, was Albon, but couldn't quite make the chicane. Had to bail out of it and head through the runoff area, and that allowed...
yeah, I feel I have enough pace here.
And that allowed Piastri through. So Magnussen 10th, Piastri 11th, Albon 12th. That was Carlos Sainz on the radio there. Still yet to pit, sitting in 5th.
Yeah, a bit of politicking there for Carlos Sainz, back to the pit wall, trying to explain that he has more pace, or feels that he has more pace than Charles Leclerc in front. So a possible team order there coming Carlos Sainz's way. We'll see.
News from the stewards, the unsafe releases that were being investigating. Hamilton and Alonso, no further action. Lando Norris, no further action. So no penalties coming their way. They have gotten away with it. So this is the order as it stands then. Verstappen leads, Alonso, Hamilton, the top 3, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, 4th, 5th and 6th, all yet to pit. Ocon is in 7th, Bottas 8th, Norris 9th. Then it's Magnussen who rounds out the top 10.
Fernando Alonso finally getting into clean air there, about 2.8 seconds behind Max Verstappen, going purple by a 10th over Max Verstappen, hitting a 1:16.5 over Max Verstappen's 1:16.6. So yeah, we will see if he's able to close that gap over the coming laps.
Let's see. They are both running 11-lap-old hard compound tyres, but Alonso has the fastest lap right now. Gaps appearing on track currently. Further down the order, we're still waiting for those who didn't pit under the safety car to see when they do pit. They're going to be hanging on as long as they can to get to either to their next official window, or if we get another safety car intervention. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri before we do all that, who's in 11th at the moment, staring at the rear end of the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, up through the gears, down the main straight. The grandstand's packed, and they're getting an absolute grandstand of an overtake of Piastri chemistry, round the outside into the braking zone of turn 1, through onto the Haas, and now Kevin Magnussen has to look in his mirrors because Alex Albon is right on to the back of him as well in that Williams.
So interestingly, at the front, Harry, Alonso in just one lap has already broken the DRS for Hamilton. So that suggests he did have quite strong pace behind that Mercedes. And well, let's see, but so 3/10 quicker than Hamilton he was on that first lap. Can Hamilton hang on or not?
Can Alonso close in on Verstappen? Wouldn't that give us something all to shout about as well? That would be amazing. 3.4 seconds the gap is between Verstappen and Alonso. Then Hamilton, Leclerc, Sainz. Here is Leclerc.
And Charles, we want a clean and fast stint. Sainz will not attack you.
Okay, well, there's the politics put at bay for the time being. Carlos Sainz will not attack Charles Leclerc. Just a George Russell update after his big crash into the wall, making heavy contact, bringing out the safety car, came into the pits. We all thought it might have been day done. He went out back on track, but he's still 19th and last, 6/10 the gap between himself and Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. So we can't find a way through on Gasly. So definitely some lasting effects on that Mercedes. I think it might be fair to say. Himself saying on the radio, well, it's a bit bent, but it's going.
Do you know what? I'm wondering whether Ferrari are trying to one-stop this race. 25 laps, 26 laps now into the race. They're still on the medium tyre. They're saying they want a clean and fast stint. No racing between them. Leclerc's now gap Sainz to 1.3 seconds. I think they're going to try and extend this stint, do one stop, and that would potentially bring them into play for the podium positions.
I wonder if they're going to one stop, they're going to have to go to maybe around lap 43, lap 50, something like that.
No. People said the hard tyre will go a long way.
Okay.
So yeah, the risk is that they might be ahead of the two stoppers when the two stoppers come in or come back out, I should say. But can they hold them off?
Right.
Ferrari putting on some strategic smarts, you say?
Well, let's see whether it's smart or not, but some strategics, yes.
Fred Vasseur, the team principal of Ferrari, watching on in contemplation from the Ferrari pit wall here in Canada at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve for the 8th race of the Formula One Championship in 2023. The midfield pack is providing us with the most entertainment so far, or at the moment, for certain. This is the sound of Alex Albon, who is now trying to repass Kevin Magnussen in front of him for 11th spot. They both have DRS. Albon in the Williams on the outside coming into turn 1. Magnussen on the inside. K-Mag holds on for the time being. Albon having to settle in behind as they make their way uphill towards turn 3.
The other thing that's interesting about this race is Sergio Perez in 6th place. He's not making the ground you would expect of someone in a Red Bull. And do you know what? The people are beginning to say in the paddock, is it Max or is it the Red Bull? How much is which? Because Perez has had a terrible series of races. He should, if that was Verstappen in that Red Bull, I bet you would have come through the field a lot quicker than this. He's still behind the Ferraris, Perez, and he's on the hard tyre, which should be a much faster tyre than the mediums on the Ferraris by this stage. But he's 3.3 seconds behind Sainz and doesn't look like he's able to make any ground up.
That will certainly be one to ponder throughout the rest of the action and perhaps throughout the rest of the season for Sergio Perez. Another poor qualifying to his name, and as Andrew says, up into 6th without pitting on that hard compounded tyre and not able to make the progress that you would expect making progress. And he's been involved in quite a few dicey overtakes so far as Lando Norris in the McLaren. He's right up behind Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Further back though, Lance Stroll does exactly what Kevin Magnussen does right at the start of this race, and under the braking zone into the final chicane is squeezed out onto the left hand side into the grass, nearly loses control of his Aston Martin. And I'm not sure if I think he did mean to pit because he was always going in there, but the rate at knots of the cars in front of him that came up close in the braking zone saw Stroll have a bit of a hairy moment as he then raced into the pit lane, which powers straight into the pit stops, and Aston Martin and Lance Stroll doing a good job there for Lance Stroll and getting him back out, but he comes out plumb last on the hard compounded tyre.
Yeah, a little update on the British driver George Russell, involved in an incident of his own earlier on in this race, running about a second behind Pierre Gasly in P18, but he's not making much ground. He's 2 seconds off the last lap of his teammate Lewis Hamilton. So definitely some damage to that car. Is Verstappen radio?
I have no grip on this tyre.
Yeah, copy that, Max.
Max Verstappen reporting his grip status on that tyre at the moment. His gap 3.5 seconds in the lead to Fernando Alonso. Once again, though, on the back straight, it's Alex Albon trying to find a way through on the Haas of Kevin Magnussen. He tries the outside into the chicane, but then manages to power straight through on Magnussen on the exit and down the main straight. The Thai racer gets the move done on the Dane into turn 1. Albon up into 11th, Magnussen down into 12th, into the clutches now of Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. Then comes Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, Nico Hülkenberg in the second of the Haas's, Nick De Vries is 16th in the AlphaTauri. They're all really nose to tail, but unable to find a way through on each other.
And switch right.
Happy models. White box. Not yet.
Stay out.
So Carlos Sainz on the radio there, speaking to his Ferrari engineer, doing a little bit of negotiating about when they might box and what mode they might well be in. Sainz once again perhaps overruling his team there. Lap 29 of 70 here in Montreal. Max Verstappen leads, Alonso, Hamilton the top three, Leclerc, Sainz and Perez 4th, 5th and 6th have not pitted. Esteban Ocon is 7th, Valtteri Bottas, who was also not pitted, is in 8th, along with Lando Norris is 9th and Oscar Piastri 10th. Then it's Albon in 11th, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Zhou Guanyu and Nico Hülkenberg rounds out the top 15. Nick De Vries, Pierre Gasly, George Russell, who had a big crash earlier on in the race, clouted the wall, made it back to the pit, and by some miracle Mercedes have got that car back out on the track, but there is clearly some lasting damage on that Mercedes because he is not making any inroads on Gasly in front of him. Lance Stroll is the only driver behind Russell who has just come into a pit stop. He's now done 2 stops and he's back out on the hard compound of tyre in his home race.
Yeah, we were wondering if Fernando Alonso would then close the gap to Max Verstappen after he got clean air around Lewis Hamilton, but that's not the case right now. Max Verstappen putting 4/10 on Fernando Alonso on the previous lap, and he now has almost a 4-second gap there at the front.
I think what's interesting, Ollie, I don't think anyone would really have expected Alonso to challenge Verstappen, even though he has got some upgrades on that Aston Martin this weekend. What's interesting is how much pace advantage he's got over Hamilton. Here's Verstappen's radio.
I'm just losing grip with this tire now.
Yeah, okay, Max, I think we've got that message. Thank you. Just head down.
Red Bull obviously not interested in taking Verstappen off the hard tyres anytime soon. So I was about to say that Alonso was pulling out half a second on Hamilton, which he had on the previous lap, but they've pretty much matched each other. Actually, Hamilton was just over a tenth quicker than Alonso on that last lap, but he still doesn't alter the fact that Alonso is now 2.4 seconds ahead of Hamilton after overtaking him a few laps ago. So it does look like he's got that gap to the Mercedes under relative control at the moment.
Yeah, that was an amusing message from the pit wall there to Max Verstappen. Clearly they have a better picture of what's going on track, and he's still the fastest car on track, even though he's complaining of his grip state.
You're listening to coverage of the Canadian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. It's lap 31 of 70. Max Verstappen leads in the Red Bull by 4.5 seconds. Fernando Alonso chases him. Lewis Hamilton is third after a great battle between Alonso and Hamilton. Saw the Spaniard get the upper hand, and with the fastest lap, that Aston Martin with upgrades this weekend is proving quite handy. Leclerc and Sainz in the 2 Ferraris are 4th and 5th. Now they're on the medium compound of tyre which they started this race with. They have not come into the pits yet and are trying to extend their strategy as far as they can. Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who started out a position outside of the top 10, is currently occupying 6th, having also not pitted, but he's on the hard compound of tyre and is not cutting his way through the field as we would expect. Ocon is in the Alpine in 7th in front of the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, and it's the 2 McLarens of Norris and Piastri that round out the top 10. Nico Hülkenberg has just peeled off into the pits, down from 15th position. He actually started this race in the top 5. Should have been a front row start for the Hulk, but a penalty after qualifying saw him hit with 3 places. But it's a fairly tidy pit stop as he screeches the wheel. Smoke rises from the rear tyres as the Haas peels off out of the pit lane, which actually feeds out into the right-hander of turn 2. So you completely miss turn 1, the left-hander. Instead, you're straight out and into turn 2.
I don't understand that pit stop for Nico Hülkenberg. That was his second pit stop, and they're not even halfway into this race. So obviously struggling with the conditions out there, maybe the grip of that car.
Here's Verstappen's radio again.
He's just saying grip is getting better and better now.
Yeah, so we didn't get the bleep in our ears, did we? Apologies for that. So the Haas has been notorious for its poor race pace this year, Ollie, so far, and a lot of that is to do with excessive tyre usage. So perhaps that's what we're seeing on Hulkenberg, whose race, at sort of 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, everything was looking fantastic for him. He was second on the grid. It's all gone a bit wrong for him ever since, and now he's basically plumb last in that Haas. I don't think he'll necessarily finish there, because others might have to pit and drop behind him as well, but his aim of being in the top 10 by the end of the race is not looking that hopeful at the moment.
No, well, both Haas's actually saying coming into this weekend they really need to work on their race pace. It's the qualifying where they're reasonably happy with that. Over one lap, the Haas is actually pretty handy, but in the race, that is where they start to struggle and need real focus. Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo has also just pitted. Lando Norris in the McLaren is under investigation now by the stewards for driving unnecessarily slowly. That had been noted previously, but it's clearly serious enough that the stewards are now going to investigate that. Lando Norris currently sits in 9th. Some nice midfield battles developing here for the Canadian Grand Prix, the Formula 1 action on lap 33 of 70. Don't forget, though, that we have the US Open Golf action coming up later today, this evening on BBC Radio 5 Live, with Rory McIlroy heading into the final round, 1 shot behind the leaders. That follows us later here at 10 o'clock on 5 Live. Also reaction to day 3 of the first Ashes Test, England v Australia. Rain stopped play this afternoon and has ended play, so England lead Australia by 35 runs with 8 wickets remaining. All the reaction on the TMS podcast and the BBC Sport website.
I have to say this is a very encouraging performance from Ferrari. They're 4th and 5th, they're on medium tyres, they haven't pitted yet, and yet their Leclerc in 4th is matching. In fact, he's quicker than Hamilton in 3rd, a little bit slower than Alonso in 2nd. But for them, a team that's really struggled for race pace this year, that's very encouraging. And in terms of strategy as well, I think they deserve some praise. This apparent one-stop strategy now is possible, not impossible, I should say, that the Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton might also one-stop it, depending on what the tyre wear is like on these hard tyres. But even so, that gamble on staying out on the medium tyre, which no one else took really, no one else of any significance anyway, it looks like it's playing out for them at the moment. We have to keep it in context. It's a track with slow corners mainly only, which is where the Ferrari's quite strong. It struggles in the faster corners. Even so, it's a positive weekend for Ferrari on the Sunday after a very difficult Saturday, which team boss Fred Vasseur described to me as disastrous earlier, even though he then immediately rode back on it. Here's Ocon's radio.
There's a few cars switching to 2 stops now. We're still thinking plan A.
So Esteban Ocon there being told to stick with plan A. He's currently occupying 7th, and it's a quietly impressive race so far for the Frenchman in that Alpine.
So there was something quite revealing in that message. Remember what I just said about the leaders maybe one-stopping? Ocon stopped at the same time as them, switched to the same hard tyres. He's one-stopping. Harry.
Yeah, there's action on track. I must interrupt you, Andrew, because there's the Haas and the AlphaTauri of Kevin, it's Nico Hulkenberg, I believe, who's coming together with the AlphaTauri. They were fighting going into turns 1 and 2 and nearly running each other off the road. Hulkenberg involved in that, and now they both come together and head straight on at turn 3. There's a little bit of runoff there, and they have gone almost interlocking wheels into that runoff area. So it's Nick De Vries in the AlphaTauri and it's Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. My apologies to Nico Hulkenberg there. It is Kevin Magnussen now who are both trying to reverse and get back onto the track. While they were battling, that allowed George Russell and the Mercedes to nick through, but that incident all started from turn 1, Ollie.
Yeah, and as you see images here of pit lane, crews getting ready for a potential pit stop if it were to go virtual safety car or full course yellow, as we see both drivers rolling away there. So no need for a full course. As we see the replay here of the 2 drivers, it's quite silly driving in my opinion from these 2. Yuki Tsunoda going down the inside.
It is De Vries in the AlphaTauri, and that allowed George Russell to nick through on the inside of turn 2. De Vries really forced Magnussen out into the runoff on the exit of turn 1. Magnussen was having none of it, came back with elbows out, forced Nick De Vries out on the exit of the pit lane, and They left a huge gap on the inside. That allowed George Russell to nick through, and they made their way uphill towards turn 3. And Nick de Vries, I think, quite frustrated there, trying to get down the inside of Kevin Magnussen, coming into the right-hander of turn 3, locked up his wheels and went steaming straight on, and Kevin Magnussen couldn't turn right, so they both went flying straight.
No, Kevin was in a position to make the corner there in turn 3, but he couldn't turn in because of the locking Nick de Vries going straight on, so unfortunate there.
Just to cast people's mind back a bit, 2016 Austrian Grand Prix, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton battling. Rosberg got penalised for a move. It wasn't very similar to that. I mean, with Hamilton, they ended up colliding, and Hamilton's wing, the Rosberg's wing was damaged. Hamilton won the race as a result of that. But it's the sort of thing that De Vries could get penalised for, and we're just seeing a message from race control, incident noted, causing a collision.
Yeah, no shocks there. I would think that would then become an under investigation. But we are getting a few pit stops. The yellow flag has been cleared because Magnussen and De Vries both able to get going again and have both come into the pits for a fresh set of tyres. So Bottas and Gasly, I think, have just peeled out of the pit lane. Lap 37 of 70. Max Verstappen leads Alonso and Hamilton.
Meanwhile, 2 laps after Alpine said they were going to stick with plan A and not do a 2-stop, Ocon's just pitted for fresh tyres. So I don't know what the hell's going on there.
But changing all the time.
But it does raise the question about, will the leaders 1-stop like the Ferraris, or will they do 2 stops? And that could have a big complexion change on the race.
And still, all the time, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez have still not come into the pits. Still out there. It's the 2 Ferraris that are actually quietly impressing, staying out on the medium compound of tyre. Sergio Perez, though, as I say that he still pitted, finally comes into the pits, and Perez will receive some quick action from his engineers. He'll be hoping as he trundles down the pit lane and peels in to his grid spot right at the top. Piastri follows him in the McLaren as well. It is a nice tidy stop for Sergio Perez. 2.3 seconds the gap.
Race control information here coming for Lando Norris. A 5-second time penalty for car 4. Unsportsmanlike behavior. Not sure what that's coming from.
Well, I wonder if he was under investigation for slowing down unnecessarily, but I've never seen, I don't think in my time, which albeit is short, unsportsmanlike behaviour being a reason why somebody has been given a 5-second time penalty. But that is what has been dished out to Lando Norris, who currently resides in 11th spot in this Grand Prix in that McLaren, as Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, who we ride on board with now, down the back straight, has been told to box. He is coming into the pits for his first pit stop and going to get rid of those medium compound tyres. And so he heads in and trundles down to the pits. So now we are just awaiting, really, Charles Leclerc to come into the pits, because Sergio Perez came into the pits last lap around.
Harry, is he going to get out ahead of Perez? That's the question here. That's why Ferrari's reacted with Sainz, not Leclerc.
It was a very quick stop.
It is a quick stop, 2.8 seconds for the Ferrari, who now powers down full speed. Where is Sergio Perez? That is the question, and he's nowhere near. So Sainz then managing to stay in 5th position. So that is a really, really good call then for Carlos Sainz, who maintains position now with fresh rubber on the hard compound tyre.
So it's not to use this tyre up if there's anything left in it. I'm already used it.
So reading between the lines there, they're looking to pit in the coming laps, in 2 or 3 laps or so. So Lewis Hamilton getting that information from, I believe that was Bono. No hammer time.
No hammer time.
But yeah, basically is what that means.
Well, this is the sound of Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who we thought might be putting a bit of pressure on Carlos Sainz, hence the Ferrari reaction to pits. But Sainz untroubled because Sergio Perez is a little bit stuck behind Alex Albon, who's up into 6th at the moment. And Alex Albon has only come into the pits once. Sergio Perez as well, but he's on the medium compounded tyre, the faster compounded tyre, and you very much think in the faster car. And this looks like a move is coming up nicely down the back straight. Sergio Perez with the DRS open, the rear wing flap shuts under braking, down the inside of the Williams before they even make it into the braking zone of the final chicane. The quick right left-hander that brings you out onto the main straight, the packed grandstand to your right, the sun beaming down as he heads off into the left-hand sweeper of turn 1. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc has been told to pit and has already done so, and is now making his way back out onto the track and comes out very nicely into fourth, still in front of his teammate Sainz.
A replay here of Sergio Perez mounting an attack on Alex Albon. Easily goes around through the DRS zone heading into the final chicane.
That incident between Nick de Vries and Kevin Magnussen is now under investigation. No surprises there. It was noted, now very much being investigated by the stewards, who've been quite busy this afternoon. About to get busier in the pit lane for Mercedes, though. Lewis Hamilton has been told to pit as he heads down and gets the pit limiter on down to 80 kilometres an hour and angles that Mercedes with precision into the box. Quick change of tyres go on for the engineers. Fist bumps all round, and Hamilton back on his way and out into turn 2.
And they're clearly just reacting to the two Ferraris pitting behind them, covering off that undercut opportunity for those two drivers in red. So maybe we can expect Fernando Alonso and then Max Verstappen to come in the coming laps.
So lap 41 of 70 then, Max Verstappen leads by 5 seconds to Fernando Alonso, who has the fastest lap in his Aston Martin. Then it's Lewis Hamilton, who's just come into the pits and is back out in third, ahead of the two Ferraris, which strategy so far paying off for them. In fourth and fifth, Perez is sixth, Albon 7th, Russell 8th, Ocon and Bottas round out the top 10. Then it's Norris, Stroll, Piastri, Hulkenberg and Gasly, the top 15. Tsunoda, Zhou, De Vries and Magnussen 19th, and last, as we've lost Logan Sargent from this race in the Williams.
So Harry, Hamilton's come out of the pits just 4 seconds ahead of Leclerc, and Hamilton's on the, is he on the medium tyre? That's what the timing screen says.
Yes.
And Leclerc's on the hard. What's going to happen between those two drivers? Can Leclerc challenge Hamilton for the final place on the podium?
Quick stop for Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso is in and out in 2.6 seconds and should be out quite comfortably into second place, because it's about 24 seconds back to Lewis Hamilton. So all clear for the two-time champion. And as we said, the gap between Leclerc and Hamilton was 4 seconds. It's now very quickly under 3.5 seconds. So Leclerc closing in on the Mercedes driver here. Update from the stewards room. The incident involving Nick de Vries and Kevin Magnussen, no further action, which is a bit of an interesting call, I think, especially with Andrew bringing up the 2016 Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton incident, looking very similar, of locking up your tyres on the inside of another car and forcing you both off the track. But they carry on fighting on the track because they are right behind each other. De Vries 18th, Kevin Magnussen 19th, but they both got to get out of the way because through comes the Ferrari.
Sergio Perez going purple on the previous lap with his medium set of tires on, and as we see Max Verstappen coming into pit lane, we'll see which tire compound he equips the Red Bull with.
Yeah, our race leader is in, angles the nose of that Red Bull nicely. The front jackman picks the Red Bull up off its wheels, and it's a nice tidy change, all four wheels on and off within 2.7 seconds for the Red Bull driver, who will come out with a mighty lead of, well, actually not as mighty, 7.5 seconds, and he's back out onto the medium compound tyre, still in the lead of this race. Meanwhile, it was his teammate who had the fastest lap, and I believe Charles Leclerc has just nicked that off him. So Leclerc's pace is coming at a rate of knots. Leclerc had it momentarily, Perez takes it right back from him, but Leclerc coming at Hamilton at a rate of knots, 2.6 seconds. The gap now was 4 seconds a lap ago, so Leclerc is closing in on that podium place.
Yeah, and the top three now with a new set of tires just absolutely lighting up the timing screens, going purple in the micro sectors, is Hamilton in sector 1 and Max Verstappen doing the same in sector 2.
This is the sound of Sergio Perez up through the gears, powering himself around this track, currently sitting in 6th position. He's now on the medium compound of tyre. He was on the hard in his first stint and just couldn't find a way through Sainz or Leclerc. The gap wasn't really there for him, and he wasn't cutting his way through the field as we would expect him to do in that Red Bull. He's now just under 3.5 seconds back from Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. So those three have all now pitted, but they're running alternative strategies. Both Ferraris now on the hard compound of tyre. Perez came in to switch for the softer rubber, the medium compound of tyre. It's Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, the top 6.
So Sainz will not attack you?
Leclerc being assured there that his teammate will not attack. Last lap around, Sainz was a little bit slower, so he's not finding huge rates of knots onto the back of Leclerc, but perhaps he's just trying to find a little bit of clean air to run his Ferrari in. They are occupying 4th and 5th at the moment. We haven't spoken much about Pierre Gasly yet, a disaster of a qualifying for the Alpine racer, because he hasn't really been featuring too much in this race, hasn't been able to carve his way through the field massively, and is currently embroiled in a battle down in 14th position with Nico Hülkenberg. The Haas not working out for them after such a brilliant qualifying. They are occupying 14th and 15th.
Yeah, one of the cars moving slowly there out of turn 9, I believe. Was that the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg?
I didn't see that in time, but it is actually running out of the hairpin now, down the back straight, which runs adjacent to the huge rectangular basin that is here of water that was created for the rowing back for the 1976 Summer Olympics. So I think they may have been slowing down to let Sergio Perez come through under blue flags. Yeah, so that's the battle between Hülkenberg and Tsunoda as well. Or actually, no, it was De Vries and Magnussen, the other AlphaTauri and the other Haas, who are close on track at the moment. Magnussen 4/10 behind Nick De Vries in a fierce battle over 18th and 19th after those two came together. No penalty for the action that Nick De Vries made, or Kevin Magnussen, so they are fighting for pride if nothing else. Verstappen leads 4.6 seconds the gap to Alonso and Hamilton.
Yeah, and Lewis Hamilton loving life so far on that new set of medium tires, lighting up the timing screens, goes purple on the last lap with a 16.0. Max Verstappen's last was a 16.3, and Fernando Alonso also a 16.3. So, yeah, close up at the front right now. Not on track, but as per their previous laps, they are quite competitive.
A point worth making, I think, here is that Verstappen or Perez, the Red Bulls have basically won every race this year. Here's Verstappen's radio.
There is a bit of a race on behind us, so yeah, people are pushing a lot more than you for the moment.
Okay, so that puts what I'm about to say into some kind of context. But Verstappen or one of the Red Bull drivers has won every race this year by about 25 seconds or so. But this time, Alonso's only 4.5 seconds behind. Now, it's obvious from the message from GP Lambiase there, Max Verstappen's race engineer, that Verstappen's not extending himself. But then you have to ask yourself how much he extended himself in the previous races as well. So this is a step forward for the rest of the field, although it has to be put into context. Meanwhile, we thought Hamilton was under threat from Charles Leclerc in 3rd place. He's just upped his pace. He doesn't look like he is now. So the race seems to stabilise a little bit in these positions. And as for Ferrari's message about Leclerc and Sainz, I was about to say Leclerc looks like he's got more pace than Sainz, but on that lap actually Sainz was quicker.
Yeah, the gap between the two Ferraris, who are currently occupying 4th and 5th at the moment, is about 2 seconds. The gap between Alonso and Hamilton now just under 5 seconds. So Hamilton not quite closing in on Alonso as he would have hoped, but he does have the fastest lap on that time around. So Hamilton pushing hard then here in Canada at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve for the 8th race of the Formula One calendar. Max Verstappen leads Alonso, Hamilton, Leclerc, Sainz, the top 5, Perez, Albon, Russell, Ocon, Bottas, who's have a quietly impressive race in 10th, currently on course to score a point, but we are still on the 47th lap of 70. Then it's Norris, Stroll, Piastri, Gasly, Hülkenberg, the top 15, Tsunoda, Zhou, Magnussen and De Vries, the top 19. Sargent in the Williams is the only driver out of this race.
Yeah, again there, Lewis Hamilton going purple on the previous lap, now putting 4/10 on the previous lap of Max Verstappen. So yeah, I would expect Max to be in complete control of this race. He still has a 4-second lead over Fernando Alonso in 2nd. And yeah, overtaking on this track doesn't come easy. So certainly understanding the race is behind him, but knowing that he has something in his pocket just in case.
George Russell in a damaged Mercedes from earlier on. We thought his race was done after he made contact with the wall, but Mercedes got him back to the pits. They fixed that car up and they've got it back out, and Russell, after all the pit stops, has shuffled up into 8th spot now, and he's 8/10 at the moment behind Alex Albon and the Williams in the battle for 7th and 8th, and closing in sharply as they make their way out of the right hand hairpin, which leads you onto the back straight here in Canada. The rear wing flap flies open for that Mercedes with a press of a button for DRS, but I don't think he's quite close enough on this occasion. Has actually a little peer out from behind the Williams of Albon, but he's not close enough as they bounce over the curbs.
You tell me when lift and coast is okay. Just stop doing it.
Yeah, we will do, but please keep doing it now. Please keep doing it.
Yeah, I want to win the race, mate.
Fernando Alonso is not giving up on this race win, not happy lifting and coasting, so the sooner he can stop that, the better. So Alonso holding back there, because clearly, Ollie, lifting and coasting, can we put that in a little bit of context? Are we right on board with the Aston Martin?
Oh, as he goes straight on.
Well, that's a big lift.
In turn 8 and 9. So pushing a little bit too much through that section. And there's a couple of benefits from lifting and coasting, as we see Pierre Gasly going extremely close to the wall of champions. But I was saying, you know, it saves fuel and also saves tires. So when you're braking as late as possible into these corners, it's putting a lot of stress on those 4 corners and those 4 tires. And by lifting and coasting, it's just putting less stress on those Pirelli tires. So they're just looking for more longevity at this moment, and they're trying to take those hard tires as long as they can.
Yeah, well, we're on lap 49 of 70 at the moment, and George Russell is in that Mercedes in 8th spot at the moment, pulling out massively to the side on the back straight to get out of the way, or to get out of the dirty air. We're mentioning that word again in Formula 1 after the regulations were set out to try and cut that down, but he really pulls out of the way of the Albon Williams in front of him on the back straight.
Yeah, George, this race has been running in a lot of traffic, not something that they expected as he started on the second row. So yeah, potentially having to cool the car and the radiators and the side pods by ducking out of the slipstream of the car in front, in this case, Alex Albon.
For some classic Albon defending, you got the straight line speed.
So Alex Albon radio transmission there, requesting some classic Alex Albon defending as George Russell mounts an attack. So
Williams will be buoyed by this, though, because Albon, yes, it was mixed conditions. He topped the Q2 session, but it was a great showcase of how well they were able to call the conditions from a strategy case. Running in 7th at the moment, a good haul of points for the Thai driver, who's running new upgrades on that Williams. He was the only driver in that team. Sargent wasn't running any of the upgrades, just Albon. So either way, this is a really encouraging signs for a team that are still making their way back to their former glories.
Yeah, definitely, and hopefully confidence inspiring for Logan Sargent, who unfortunately is out of this race. The one car on the side of the garage in Williams who doesn't have those updates, so he'll be looking forward to the coming races. Hopefully they will then get the material and the wings and upgrades that they have on that car in the future races.
This is the sound of Yuki Tsunoda closing up onto the back of Nico Hülkenberg. Last lap around on the back straight. Nice easy move with DRS down the inside into the braking zone of the right hand and left hand chicane. The wall of champions to your right, and Tsunoda makes the move stick and gets his AlphaTauri up into 15th spot. Now, I wanted to do a little bit of a weather check because when we look out of the commentary box window, which overlooks the pit lane here, right at the end, we're just overlooking the Williams garages, actually. There is a lot of grey overcast cloud, but then there are, on the other side of the track, if you look further into the distance of the central business district of Montreal that looks opposite us here in Montreal at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, there are blue skies appearing too. I think we could have done with a bit of that rain that's been holding Edgbaston account and stopping the cricket earlier on today. Would be quite nice for some of that to happen now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't count out any precipitation here in Montreal today. There is still a very small chance. Here's Hamilton. Yeah, just a note for Lewis Hamilton. Wind is picking up, so good information for the drivers. Not what they want to hear, because these cars can be extremely unpredictable, as we've seen in the past with these gusty winds at this particular circuit. Some losing control earlier on in the damp conditions.
That was the voice of the American racing driver Oliver Askew, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. Also joining us in the commentary box is the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. We're on lap 51 of 70 here for the Canadian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen leads by 6 seconds from Alonso. Hamilton in third. Leclerc signs the top 5. Then it is Sergio Perez. Albon in the Williams is 7th in front of Russell, Ocon and Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Rounds out the point scorers currently. We will be continuing with this coverage on 5 Live. Stephen Nolan will be here from 9 o'clock, and then we head into US Open golf action coming up with Ian Carter and the team in LA. Ricky Fowler, Wyndham Clark lead with Rory McIlroy heading into the final round, just one shot behind. That follows later this evening on 5 Live at 10 o'clock in the evening.
So Max Verstappen then finally starting to turn up the wick, goes about a half a second faster than the 2 cars behind on the previous lap. So wasn't taking as much out of the tire early on in that stint with his medium compared to Lewis Hamilton there.
Nick de Vries has come into the pit lane. He was now plumb last. He was already last, battling with Kevin Magnussen. So tough day at the office so far for the Haas of Magnussen and the AlphaTauri of Nick de Vries. This is the sound of Lando Norris, who, a reminder, has a 5-second penalty for unsportsmanlike driving. He's currently occupying 11th place. He's making his way through the right-hander of turn 7 onto the DRS straight in the middle part of this track as he flies underneath the trees and the bridge that then make your way through the right-hander of turn 8. Clout a little bit of the curb and power your car through the right-hander of turn 9, the scene of George Russell's crash earlier on in this race before you find yourself into the heavy braking zone and the right-hander of the turn 10 hairpin. You're almost in a little bit of an amphitheatre there, surrounded by grandstands that are absolutely packed to the rafters, and then it is full beans down the back straight as he tries to catch up to the back of the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, who himself has the Alpine of Esteban Ocon in his sights as they clout over the curbs through the final chicane. Still occupying 11th place though for Norris, Bottas in 10th and Esteban Ocon in 9th though, who is closing in on George Russell, who is in 8th in a wounded Mercedes. He hasn't been able to really get right onto the back of the Albon Williams in front of him, and in that happening Russell is really now coming under pressure from Ocon, Bottas and Norris behind. So I think we're going to have a good battle here for 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th.
Yeah, it's in Norris's best interest to try and extend the gap to the cars behind, because he does have that 5-second penalty, but it's difficult for him because he's stuck in the DRS train at the moment. He's got 4 cars directly in front of him, also putting out the worst of the dirty air as he sits behind them. So I'm still very curious as to why he got that unsportsmanlike penalty. I don't think I've ever seen that.
I think he was noted for slowing down quite aggressively, and I wonder if that was to coming into the pit lane or under the safety car conditions that we had as well. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of talk about that post-race, and we'll hear from him afterwards to see what he made of that decision. But right now, he's in 11th and fighting as hard as he can to get up to the rear end of the Valtteri Bottas Alfa Romeo. This is the sound of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon into the braking zone, down through the gears in the quick left hand, right hand that make up turn 1 and 2. It's a bit of a Senna S shape, really, and that brings you then uphill towards turn 3, and then you really come under the trees into this middle part of the track as they race through turn 3 and 4. The right-hand kink of 5 approaches, which isn't really a big corner to negotiate in these modern-day Formula 1 cars. Into the distance, the city of Montreal, as we are on an island here in the St. Lawrence River in the Parc Jean Drapeau on Notre Dame Island. A semi-permanent street course, but it's not really used for anything else throughout the year other than the Formula 1 racing. And we have a slow George Russell in the Mercedes, who has just slowed down, coming into the hairpin and let a bunch of cars through. Let's hear from him.
So we think we're going to have to retire this car. Front left brake wear is too high. Tell me what you want me to do. So cool the car, just cool the brakes down, and we'll box end of this lap.
Well, they gave it a good go, but George Russell wasn't really making any kind of gains. He was stuck behind Albon in 8th, and eventually time has been called on that Mercedes car.
Yeah, he was still in a points-paying position, but it sounds like he had some damage to the brake duct, or at least one brake duct of the right side of that car, where he made contact to the outside of turn 6. So yeah, unfortunate day there for the British driver.
Yeah, and it will be a second retirement for George Russell this season after Australia, where the engine went on him and some disappointed faces in the Mercedes garage. The reserve driver Mick Schumacher watches on from behind the team principal Toto Wolff.
So sorry everyone, nothing more to say, sorry.
And he's apologising there, Ollie, because it was driver error that has led to this. A rare mistake that we see from Russell.
Yeah, very rare mistake, but not rare at this circuit. You know, the margins at this, what would we call a street circuit or a hybrid circuit, as there is, you know, a lot of runoff in certain areas, but at the corner where he hit the wall, the margins are extremely small, and he just high-sided the apex curve there, and had just lost control of the car. So innocent mistake there from him that cost him a lot.
You're listening to live coverage of the Canadian Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live. We are getting into the closing stages of this race, lap 56 of 70. Max Verstappen so far has been untroubled with a 7.3 second gap at the top of the field, but we suspect he is not really pushing as hard as he can. Alonso is in second. Fighting talk from Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin after a good battle with Lewis Hamilton. He has always got the race win on his mind, and never say never in Formula One, but at the moment he is having to settle for second. Lewis Hamilton with the fastest lap is a couple of seconds behind Alonso, just keeping tabs on him, and it's actually just dipped to below 2 seconds. So that fight could still bear out over the course of the next few laps. Leclerc and Sainz in a much better day for Ferrari after a disaster qualifying. So far, the strategy has been called right, and that Ferrari working its tyres well. Leclerc in fourth and Sainz rounding out the top five. Sergio Perez hasn't been able to carve his way through the field as we might have expected, but having started outside the top 10, he has now made it up into sixth place in front of Alex Albon. Very impressive in the Williams, but he has got a battle on his hands now. He has been told to defend like Alex Albon can. He's in seventh. Ocon, though, in the Alpine is right behind him in eighth. Then comes the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas in ninth. Lando Norris in the McLaren currently occupies the final points paying position in 10th. A reminder, though, Norris does have a 5-second time penalty for unsportsmanlike behaviour. The Canadian home hero, Lance Stroll, is in 11th in the Aston Martin. Isn't too far away from this battle, and actually they're all slowed up behind Albon now, so Stroll is catching them and may well join this fight imminently.
Yeah, and Stroll after this race will be, if the position stays as they are now, in a points-paying position, because he is within that 5-second penalty period of Lando Norris ahead. And I'd say with 12 laps to go already in this race, amazing. This has gone by quite fast. This is when fatigue starts to set in for these drivers. Not so much for Max Verstappen, though, because this has been clean sailing for him since the start.
It certainly has been. Out of the points-paying positions, it is Stroll in 11th, then it's Piastri, Gasly, Tsunoda and Hülkenberg, the top 15. Zhou, Magnussen, De Vries, last of the runners in 18th. We have lost George Russell after clouting the wall early doors in this race. Continued running, but that car finally letting go on him and coming into the pits to retire the Mercedes. Logan Sargent out early in this race too, with a complete failure on Matt Williams. Two drivers out of the 20 out of this race, and actually that's a bit of a surprise in 2023 in Formula One. We are so used to seeing 20 cars finishing races. The reliability has been brilliant so far this year. So at the moment, 18 cars in this field, and the best battle on track right now is coming for the minor points paying positions: 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th. Albon, Ocon, Bottas and Norris.
On board here with Lewis Hamilton chucking the car in through the Wall of Champions chicane, very stable. As the fuel starts to burn on this car, starts to get more light and nimble, as we see here in our pictures, chasing the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso ahead. He's not that far away now.
No, he's not. It's now gone down to 1.4 seconds, the gap between Hamilton and Alonso for second and third. So Hamilton is closing in on Alonso here for second. This fight is not over yet. We're just over 10 laps away from the end of this race, and I'm saying that is game on for the podium positions.
Yeah, both on a different tyre compound. So Fernando Alonso on the hard, Lewis Hamilton on the medium. I'd imagine if he's able to mount an attack, he's going to have to get it done quickly, because that medium is not going to last as long as the hard in front.
So we've got a good battle for second and third between Alonso and Hamilton. The battle's still raging on for 7th and 8th, specifically between Albon and Ocon. This is the sound of Esteban Ocon on the podium already this year in Monaco. Alpine looking like they've had an upturn in form. And Ocon certainly spearheading the Alpine team right now after Pierre Gasly's rough run of form. Gasly down in 13th, Ocon up through the gears, through the trees, under the bridge that takes you into the braking zone of the right-hander of turn number 8. Then you come out through 9 and it's a slight curved straight which brings you into the heavy braking zone of 10. Grandstands to your left, to your front and to your right. The 180-degree full wheel lock corner. Second gear out through 11. The DRS zone becomes available. Down the back straight we go, but it's line astern for 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th at the moment. Nobody's quite close enough to make a move.
Yeah, watching the helicopter shot here of these 4 drivers, Esteban Ocon trying to get around Alex Albon in front, and very impressed with the straight line speed of the Williams. And we heard that over the radio transmission from engineer to driver, Alex Albon used that straight line speed to your advantage to keep the cars behind, and that's exactly what he's doing.
1.4 seconds the gap between Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time champion, hunting down Fernando Alonso in second, the 2-time champion. 10 laps to go. 3 championship heavyweights in the top 3 right now, although there hasn't been particular wheel-to-wheel battling between certainly all 3 of them. A little bit between Alonso and Hamilton. Here is Lewis.
It sounds like Alonso is nursing a rear brake issue.
So that is going to give Hamilton a little bit of incentive there to push that little extra. Is Alonso in a slightly wounded Aston Martin? Is he slightly holding off on how hard he can push that Aston, and is that going to allow the Mercedes to claw right up to the back of him? This battle between second and third rages on, but it's going to be a heavyweight podium if it ends in any kind of form with a Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton lineup. 7 championships for Alonso, 2 for Hamilton, I should say, 2 for Alonso, 2 for Max Verstappen. As they head back into the hairpin, Hamilton just slowly and incrementally finding a few tenths, but he's still a little bit stuck now at 1.5 seconds. Has a little bit of a skirmish with the grass, rips up the dirt on the exit of the final corner.
Yeah, only 9 laps to go. Certainly hammer time at this moment. He sees that Aston Martin in front of him now. Not making so much ground over the last couple of laps, still just about 2 seconds between the 2.
Verstappen leads then, just about 8 seconds or so the gap in front for the Dutchman, in front of Alonso. Hamilton, the top 3, but Hamilton is closing on Fernando Alonso, but it's now actually just gone up to 2 seconds. So here's Alonso fighting back with a little bit of what he's got in that Aston. Leclerc and Sainz, the top 5. Perez, Albon, Ocon, Bottas and Norris, the top 10.
Yeah, Max Verstappen on the previous lap, 6 tenths away from the best lap of the race, which was set by Lewis Hamilton about 15 laps ago. So it'll be interesting here to really see if he has something left in that back pocket, in that Red Bull, in the closing laps of this race to try and take that extra point.
This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, 6th gear up into 7th. Has a little adjustment on the steering wheel, heading down the back straight.
1.9 behind you.
Copy. Leave it to me.
That's what you like to hear from Fernando Alonso. Leave it to me, I've got this. The team have made him aware Hamilton is right on his coattails. Alonso going to pull some Alonso-style manoeuvres in the closing stages of this race here in Canada. And that gaggle still holding on strong in 7th. It's Albon, Ocon, Bottas, Norris and Stroll now really has joined the fight there. He's in 11th, outside the points at the moment, but that will become 10th if he finishes within 5 seconds of Lando Norris, who does have a time penalty for unsportsmanlike behaviour. This is the sound on board with Lando Norris, who's coming through the final chicane and onto the back of Bottas, but they're all caught in a bit of a DRS train, right, Ollie?
Yeah, certainly not much for these drivers to do, as the best passing opportunity is down the back straightaway into the final chicane under the brakes. So none of these drivers right now getting any runs on the cars in front. And I was going to say, it's quite disappointing for McLaren at the moment, running in 10th and 12th with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Earlier on in this race, it looked like it was going to be a fantastic day for them.
It really is Linus Stern at the moment. Andrew, bring you in a little bit here in the closing stages of this race. Now that is the writing on the wall here for Fernando Alonso, or has he got enough in hand, because that gap actually has gone up over the last couple of laps?
Yeah, he's now pulled it out to 2.5 seconds, so we don't know for a start that Mercedes are right to say that that Alonso's managing a rear brake issue. Harry, do you want to just take over for a minute?
Yeah, nice move from Lando Norris down the inside of Valtteri Bottas into the hairpin. They go side by side on exit. They'll both get DRS. Bottas isn't going to give this one without a fight, kicking up the dust offline. It's the Alfa Romeo on the left-hand side. Lando Norris will have the inside line coming into the final chicane. Norris through on Valtteri Bottas up into 9th. Bottas down to 10th, and now has to look at his mirrors because Lance Stroll, with the Canadian home hero right on his tail, tries to find a way through, closes right up to the back of Bottas through turn 2, but Bottas might be able to hold on to this one for the time being. So it's Norris 9th, Bottas 10th, Stroll still in 11th.
So yeah, I was going to say we don't know for sure that Alonso is managing a brake issue. Mercedes will have been listening in on Aston Martin's radio to come to that conclusion, but it sounded like from that radio message from Fernando Alonso as if he felt he had everything under control, and it certainly looks like it, because he's actually pulling away from Hamilton quite quickly at the moment. That gap's now gone up to 2.9 seconds, so I'd say he's pretty comfortable.
He said, "Leave it with me," to his engineers, and well, they certainly have. So it does look like that battle for second place is teetering out towards the end of this Grand Prix. But it is heating up quite nicely still in this mid-pack. Lando Norris, having just got through on Valtteri Bottas for 9th, now has a little bit of a gap to close to Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, who is still tucked up behind Esteban Ocon, behind Alex Albon, I should say, in the Williams, who is in 7th, 6/10 the gap. Albon has been driving brilliantly. It is so fast, the Williams, with that Mercedes power unit in the back, in a straight line, that even with a lack of DRS for Albon, he's still able to keep Ocon behind him. But while Ocon is trying to find a way through on Albon, Norris is now closing right up to the back.
I almost knocked myself out on that curve.
And that was Max Verstappen there, coming through the right-hand turn of turn 8, just clouts the curve then on the left-hander of turn 9, which forces the car up on 2 wheels at one point, and enough to get Verstappen a little bit of a worry on the radio.
That was the same exact corner that knocked out George Russell earlier on in this race, so the same apex curbing that he then got high-sided on, but yeah, he was certainly able to keep it out of the wall there for Max Verstappen. Had a bit of a giggle on the radio, just goes to show how in control he feels.
Well, right now on lap 66 of 70 here in Canada for the Canadian Grand Prix, it is Max Verstappen who looks set to take his 41st career win, but it is not over yet. Alonso is in 2nd, Hamilton is in 3rd. We'll have Stephen Nolan here on BBC Radio 5 Live from 9 o'clock, and then we'll have all the action from the US Open Golf with Ian Carter and the team. Rory McIlroy just a point behind, just a shot behind the leaders coming into the final round, and that kicks off from 10 o'clock here on 5 Live. Right now though, it is the Canadian Grand Prix, and this is the sound of Lance Stroll coming into the braking zone and coming in a little bit hot, Ollie.
Yeah, locks up the right front on entry to that hairpin, trying to attack the... Go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, I've got some news on the Lando Norris penalty. It's for slowing under the safety car to avoid a delay during a double stack for his pit stop. So basically he's backed off coming into the pits and held up the other drivers so that he didn't have to get held up behind his teammate Oscar Piastri when they pitted under the safety car.
The word unsportsmanlike, Andrew, I've not really seen that come up on the timing screens much. Is there another incident you can remember where that has been used as the reason for a penalty?
No, I agree with you, Harry. It's not the first time. Here's Norris's radio.
The rear wing is loose on the Alpine.
it's going to fall off at some point. I think it's pretty dangerous. It's very understood. We're on it.
He's not wrong. That is wobbling like crazy, that Alpine wing. If anyone remembers the Ferrari wing from the first race in Bahrain when they were trying a development, it was wobbling around the sort of vertical central axis. That's exactly what the Alpine wing on Ocon's doing. Here's Norris's radio again.
If this falls off and hits someone, it's going to be extremely bad.
He's also trying to get a penalty for Ocon so he gets to place, because he knows he's got to make up that 5-second penalty. But I don't blame him. It's exactly what every other driver would do. But back to the pit stop penalty. It's not the first time a driver's been penalised for doing that. It is the first time I've heard the words unsportsmanlike conduct used for that penalty.
As the rear wing of that Alpine shakes left to right, it's almost as if they haven't got a bolt tightened up enough on that Alpine as it clouts through the curves of turn 8 and 9, and Lando Norris is right up into Esteban Ocon as we come into the hairpin. He darts down the inside of that McLaren, gets a nose and a sniff of what might be for 8th place, but it's not enough this time around for Lando Norris as they head up through the gears, down the back straight with just a few laps remaining here in Canada. The fight is on for 8th place. Esteban Ocon and the Alpine has it currently. Lando Norris wants it, but as we've just been discussing, he has a 5-second time penalty for unsportsmanlike behaviour. We go again then across the line, down into turn 1, through the gears. Left-hander approaches, the centre S's run wild that then take you up through into turn 3. Albon 7th, Ocon 8th, Norris 9th.
And Norris absolutely loves the passing opportunity of turn 10, previously getting around his teammate Oscar Piastri and then Valtteri Bottas just a couple of laps ago. So we'll see if he's able to do that on this lap on the Alpine in front.
Yeah, shame for Piastri, who had a really strong start to this race, actually got ahead of his teammate Lando Norris, now down in 12th at the moment in that McLaren, in front of the other Alpine of Pierre Gasly, and then it's Yuki Tsunoda in 14th. So the two McLaren and Alpine cars are quite close to each other, actually.
Red Bull of Sergio Perez going down the pit lane here, as we see from our commentary box. Pitting from P6. I don't think he's going to take a penalty for that because he had a big enough gap to the cars behind.
I'd imagine he's going for fastest lap, Oliver, because he's got a big gap behind him to Alex Albon, who's still fighting to hold off Esteban Ocon and Lando Norris, who've made a bit of a gap on Valtteri Bottas behind them. So yes, Perez comes back out again. I can't see the tyres, he's on the soft tyre, so he's going to try and get the point for fastest lap in 6th place on what I think is fair to say has been a pretty underwhelming weekend for Perez.
Yeah, it certainly is, but he did have the gap enough for to come into that pit lane and not lose any time. Right, well, with just one more lap remaining, then this is as it stands at the moment. Max Verstappen would extend his gap and he would have 195 points to his name. Sergio Perez would be in second with 125 points. And then it would be Alonso in third, Hamilton fourth, Carlos Sainz gaining a place and up into fifth. In the constructors, Red Bull would have a whopping 320 points. Mercedes still occupying second and third. The big gainers really would be the Haas up into eighth, and the Williams would actually fall down a place, down into ninth ahead of the AlphaTauri. So we'll see how that all unfolds, because Albon is still in a massive fight for seventh here with Ocon and Norris. But so far it has been sublime, Ollie, once again from the Dutchman, Max Verstappen.
Yeah, with the Mercedes of George Russell falling out of this race, it's a massive blow to Mercedes' fight with Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship, with we see Lance Stroll having a horrid home weekend.
Just on to the back straight then for Max Verstappen. And you have to start asking the question, when will this man not win a race? He makes his way through the final chicane and takes the checkered flag. It's 41 wins for Max Verstappen. He equals Ayrton Senna and takes the win here in Canada. The team, Red Bull, achieve 100 Grand Prix victories. And it's a sensational day for the Milton Keynes-based team, who arrive erupt in celebration in the garage and on the pit wall. Fernando Alonso comes home to take second place on the podium, followed by the 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton in a heavyweight podium. But the battles are not done yet. I told you that battle for 7th, 8th and 9th was coming, and it still is. Albon is holding on for 7th. Lando Norris just tried to go down the inside once again of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon into the heaven of 8th. They're going side by side. It's the Alpine on the inside down the back straight. The McLaren tries to go round the outside. The Alpine forces him wide. Ocon will hold the position. Norris has to take to the runoff. Ocon crosses the line into 8th. Norris will have to settle for 9th. He will have a 5-second time penalty applied. Lance Stroll in Canada, just behind him in his home race, rounds out the point scoring positions. He left it late, and unfortunately for Lando Norris, it didn't quite pay off. It did though for Verstappen.
Not bad, Max. Another good day at the office.
Yeah, not bad that. And also 100 win for the team, so that's a great result.
Yeah, well done, mate. That is, as you say, a century for the team. So fantastic, and thank you for producing that race victory for us today. Well done, mate.
Yeah, it was maybe not our strongest track with the conditions, but it's still a very good result. It's all good.
Well, Max Verstappen there saying it all, really. And Ollie, was it ever in doubt, really?
No, it really wasn't, and unless he had any major malfunction with his car or made a mistake on track or in pit lane, it was his race to lose today. And congrats to Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton as well, as we see here on board Alonso Radio.
Well done, mate. Well done. We were nursing a little problem there, but you did a great job. I think without that little problem, Verstappen will do it.
I knew. Didn't want to say anything. Yeah, well done, guys. I'm happy. We gave everything again. I'm super pissed off.
Yeah, well done, mate. Great job.
A very happy Fernando Alonso there, second place in the race, gets back onto the podium after being off it for the last round in Spain. It's Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton, the top 3. Here he is.
Nice work, Lewis. So that's a P3, mate. Yeah, it was a tough race, guys. But great job today. Great job this weekend. Let's keep this consistency up. It's awesome. Thank you.
Nice work from Lewis Hamilton then, appreciative with the team, and he pulls up into Parc Fermé nicely. The top 3 now all in their spots. Leclerc and Sainz, a good day for the Ferraris in 4th and 5th. Sergio Perez did nick the fastest lap point in 6th. Alex Albon in a brilliant drive for Williams with 7th. Front of Ocon. Stroll and Bottas gets the final point for Alfa Romeo. But it's all eyes to Max Verstappen, who continues his dominance. You can ask the question, how much is it Max? How much is it the car? Either way, that combination is working like a dream, and he stands tall on the top of his Red Bull, celebrates with the cameras, heads straight over to the team, a hug with the Red Bull advisor, Dr. Helmut Marko, Christian Horner in the background there, but it's the engineers and the mechanics who are bearing the brunt of the celebrations. Fernando Alonso does the exact same thing, hugs all round, smiles all round, and Lewis Hamilton with Mercedes and his team celebrating being on the podium for another race, 2 consecutive races now for Lewis Hamilton. And if he was going to get on the podium anywhere, it was going to be at one of his favourite tracks, wasn't it, Ollie, in Canada?
Yeah, certainly, and I have to say I'm extremely impressed with the resurgence of Fernando Alonso. It's been over 10 years since he's really been in a competitive car, so fantastic to see. Old age is definitely not getting to him.
It certainly isn't. You do wonder, how long can Fernando Alonso go for? How late into his 40s can he go? And Lewis Hamilton, the second oldest driver on the grid, approaching his 40s quite rapidly, but on the brink, we think, of signing a contract extension with his Mercedes team. I think perhaps now he's got the taste again of being back out in front it might reinvigorate him to continue. Alex Albon wins the Driver of the Day award, and I think that is thoroughly deserved, don't you, Ollie? Down in 7th in that Williams. Fantastic. Back in the points for the first time for Albon since round 1 in Bahrain.
Yeah, incredible job for him ever since qualifying 2 when he topped that session. It's been a fantastic weekend for him, and the masterclass of defending that string of cars behind him there at the closing laps of this race.
Well, the pit lane starts to fill up, and Parc Fermé is absolutely surrounded by a sea of people, and we will hear from our top 3 with Jenson Button.
Congratulations, Max. Yet another victory from the lights to the flag. How are you feeling?
Yeah, of course, very happy right now. It was not a very straightforward race because the tires were not really getting in their window. It was very cold today compared to Friday, and we were sliding around quite a bit. But yeah, we made it work, and yeah, to win again today, win the 100 Grand Prix for the team. That's incredible.
Yeah, you must have a pretty special feeling about that. You know, you've worked with this team for many years. 100th win. How does that feel to take that for the team here?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I never expected to be on these kind of numbers myself as well, you know. So, yeah, we keep enjoying, we keep working hard, but today has been a great day again.
Did you expect a bigger challenge from Aston or Mercedes here, or this is pretty much what you expected here in Montreal?
Personally, I expected more or less what we had today, but it was, yeah, like I said, really difficult to just keep the grip in the temperature into the tires because the grip was disappearing very quickly. That's why maybe the gap was not that big, but yeah, we had a few safety cars here and there, but yeah, overall we won. That's the most important.
And lastly, this is always a very special race to come to. A lot of fans here for the sport. They've been through a lot this weekend with the weather. Have you got a message for them?
Yeah, I mean, they're so passionate about the sport. Also yesterday with the rain, they were just hanging in there, so that was great to see. And yeah, we love coming here, and hopefully we can do this for a long time.
Congratulations, Max. You've got a few fans here, Fernando. Was that the race you expected?
Probably, yes. I think we were hoping to challenge a little bit more the Red Bull, but we lost a place at the start with Luis, and then, yeah, it was a battle with the Mercedes, and Luis was pushing all the race. So I didn't have one lap where I could relax a little bit, so it was an amazing battle.
It was lovely watching 3 multiple world champions going at it. And you had a good little tussle with Lewis out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning I had a little bit more pace, and at the end I think Luis had a little bit more pace. And yeah, it was tough. It was a very demanding race, you know. All 70 laps of qualifying today.
We heard you had a few issues. You had to do a little bit of lift and coast. It's always frustrating because you want to push maximum. Was that a fuel issue or was that a rear brake issue?
I don't know really. They didn't tell me, so maybe it was not to make me worry too much. But I don't know. I felt the car okay, but I was just following the instructions. So yeah, hopefully that means that we had a little bit more pace. So next one, putting more pressure on Max.
Cool. Cheers, Fernando. To ask you a question. These guys are doing it for us, and a lot of support here for Formula One, a lot of support here for you, Lewis. This has always been a pretty special track for you. Not the result you want entirely, but you were working hard out there.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's been a great weekend for us. I think we're slowly chipping away. I think the Astons took a little bit of a step ahead this weekend when they added the upgrades, but we're working on bringing some more moving forwards. But to just have this consistency and be up on the podium here in Montreal, which is such an incredible city, and we've got such a great crowd here every single year without fail. So big thank you to everyone here.
You seem to be in a really good place. You know, there's progress being made with the team. You yourself giving it your all. It's such a pleasure for us all to see out on track. What are the areas you still think you need to improve to really take it to Aston and then finally Red Bull?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, quite an honor to be up there with 2 world champions. I was really excited to be third and just trying to be in that mix. But unfortunately, we didn't have the pace today. I think where we struggle is, I mean, we knew that this weekend this wouldn't be our strongest circuit, as we struggle in the lower speed corners particularly,
and that's really where I was losing to Fernando and to Max, just on traction out of turn 2, out of pretty much every corner. But we've got a lot of work to do, just add rear downforce to the car, but and a little bit more efficiency. But we're chipping away, as I said, and I do believe we'll get there at some stage. But yeah, Max was a little bit gone, but I think our paces are a little bit closer today, so we're going in the right direction.
Great work. Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Well, great to hear there from our top 3 with the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix winner Jenson Button. The longest race that was in Formula 1 history, over 4 hours. Not quite as long a race today, but myself and Ollie have made our way out from the commentary box into the paddock, and we're positioned quite nicely just behind from the media gaggle here in the media pen, opposite the FIA scrutineering garage, right at the far end of the pit lane, seeing the drivers come straight in to have their interviews. Esteban Ocon comes out now with a wry smile on his face. Happy days for him in the Alpine. But Ollie, actually, the biggest smile, forget the top 3, the biggest smile and the applause from everybody here came from Williams and Alex Albon, just reinforcing how brilliant that result was for them.
Yeah, so interesting to see the difference in emotions between all these drivers funneling into the media pen. Certainly Alex Albon with the biggest smile and the biggest applause. Fantastic drive from him. Driver of the day, like I said, a defensive masterclass. And yeah, I could pick out Nick de Vries and Sergio Perez, Lance Stroll, all with a little bit sadder faces walking in here.
Well, it's still good news for Lance Stroll, at least. He gets a couple of points for his efforts, especially with the 5-second time penalty that was applied to Lando Norris for unsportsmanlike behaviour. I've just seen him. I'm on my tiptoes, just having a look over the cameras here, see Lando Norris answer some questions. He doesn't look too disheartened. Sergio Perez is stood right next to him, though. An interesting race for the Mexican. He was starting in the mid-pack, down in 12th place. Managed to make hay up into 6th without pit stopping and really going hard, but he was stuck behind the 2 Ferraris, but didn't really make as many gains as we thought he would in that Red Bull. Did you expect him to finish higher?
Yeah, certainly, and Andrew made a valid point. You know, if that was Max Verstappen in that car trying to run through the field from that starting position, you know, he certainly, we think, would have made bigger gains. He did end up getting fastest lap of the race there at the end with a new set of tires, and yeah, he's not very happy, I don't think, seeing that gap in front grow to Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship, because, you know, it was only a couple of weeks ago where he felt that he could really fight for this thing.
Absolutely. Well, we're just seeing Lewis Hamilton having a chat with Max Verstappen in the cool-down room as they put their caps on and take a glug of water after quite an intense race. It was really quite sticky and muggy at the start of this race, but the wind has picked up and there is a little bit of a chill in the air as well. It's still quite grey and overcast above us, as already tyres are being wheeled out from the back of the garages and being taken away to be cleaned. Nico Hülkenberg, I can see in the distance, already signing caps and walking straight off down to Haas. A frustrating day for Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, and Kevin Magnussen embroiled in a bit of an incident with Nick de Vries. Nothing came of it in the end, and Hülkenberg, despite having an amazing starting position, Ollie, it was kind of written on the wall that he wasn't going to stay there, but they'll be disheartened to see that Williams were able to get 7th. Big points, 2 fierce competitors, those two, Williams and Haas.
Yeah, it seemed like this race today was very hard on tyres, which is absolutely not a strong suit for those 2 Haas drivers. I was hoping that Nico Hülkenberg could hold on and finish in the points-paying position. I think he deserves more than that. You know, more than where he finished today. So after a fantastic qualifying effort yesterday in the wet, difficult day for them.
It certainly was a difficult day. Should we have a little chat about the Ferraris as well? Actually, a decent day for them. They started off Friday running in the dry, in the very little dry running we had, looking quite strong, quietly impressive. Leclerc saying this is the best Friday start to a Friday we've had in a long time. Leclerc ended up in 4th, Sainz right behind him in 5th, both pretty much on top of each other, but any kind of fighting was negated by the team. They weren't going to get into that. Strategy actually paying out for them, considering how horrible qualifying was for them. To get a 4th and a 5th is good damage limitation for those two.
Yeah, he said that's the best the car's felt in a long time, but still the gap to the cars in front today, the Aston Martin, the Mercedes, the Red Bull, I mean, there's still a lot of time to be had.
Well, That's good news for the Ferrari, but the podium celebrations then are underway. Fernando Alonso makes his way out. So too does Lewis Hamilton up into the second spot, but it will be Max Verstappen who stands on the top step of the podium, his 41st career win, as we get the Dutch national anthem. Austrian national anthem ringing out there for the winning constructor, Red Bull Racing, and with that win it is 100 Grand Prix wins for Red Bull, which is mightily impressive. Max Verstappen makes it 41 career wins and it equals the great Ayrton Senna. And let's remember, Max Verstappen is only 25 years of age, on course to maybe even win every single race of the remainder that we have in this 2023 season. It's so easy, Ollie, to overlook what they're doing, right, at Max Verstappen and Red Bull's side of the garage. How impressive is this?
Extremely. I mean, we are witnessing history here today, matching one of the greatest of this sport, if not the greatest, and Max Verstappen is definitely throwing his name in the hat there for that conversation. And yeah, fantastic day. I think this is a day we're going to be looking back on for a long time, and where he's really, you know, established himself as one of the best in the world, if not the best at this very moment. So yeah, fantastic to see, fantastic to be here to witness this, and I do think it's something that we should be talking more about.
It certainly is, because when he's winning by 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds the margin, it's easy to not even see him on the images that we get in the commentary box. But actually today, he only won by just about 10 seconds, I think it was again. So clearly this track actually slightly exposing maybe some of the flaws that Red Bull has. And I'm really clutching at straws there because there aren't many flaws. It's a difficult track. Straight line speed is an absolute must, which Red Bull has in hand. But it's the slow mid-speed corners as well that you get in between those long straights as we get the champagne celebrations underway on the podium, and it is absolute spray there going down for Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Max Verstappen. And we talk of champions, Max Verstappen might well be on course for a third world championship, but he's up there on the podium with a man who has another 2 and another man who has 7. That is a heavyweight podium in Formula One.
Yeah, certainly, and Max definitely the younger of the two, and yeah, those two drivers standing alongside of him, certainly not showing any age today or any sign of slowing down. And I have to note that Max on the radio coming into pit lane, he was happy that he was able to show that performance today, because I guess you know, the team wasn't expecting that sort of pace on this particular track. Not sure what that means, but that's not good news for the rest of the guys.
It's not, and we will be going racing a not too distant future. We'll have a week off before we then head to Austria, and then we'll have the the British Grand Prix as well. So going back to more of the European rounds of racing, just seeing the media pen slightly dispersed. It's still very busy, but Esteban Ocon comes in for a chat. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine also chatting to Ocon's left, and they're sort of opposite where Ollie and I are standing. Gasly not looking too happy, and understandably, after a lowly finish. No points once again on the board for the Frenchman in 12th place. He may not be happy, but certainly the Aston Martin mechanics are, as Fernando Alonso drops the huge bottle of champagne down from the podium and hands it rather gently to one of the mechanics, who catches it, and they all celebrate and take a huge glug as well. So it's great to see them enjoying it, and yet again Aston Martin showcasing what they've got. Made a huge step at the start of this year. Kind of the reason why the midfield teams that they left behind are only able to pick up a point or two on a good day. Fernando Alonso, mighty impressive. Lance Stroll, able to get a couple of points on the board as well. Good for him in his home race, but he still needs to find another level. He does need to find that 9th gear to be able to try and get Aston Martin properly in this fight for second with Mercedes in the constructors.
You hit the nail on the head there. He got a couple of points, but it's not enough to really hold back the surging Mercedes at this point. You know, George Russell, he was on for a lot of points and a huge day for Mercedes today, possibly, both cars finishing inside the top 5. So yeah, it's up to Lance Stroll now to really come to play over the next couple of races and for the course of the rest of this season, if they really want to fight Mercedes in this Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, we mentioned the Alpine boys there as well. A word on Esteban Ocon in 8th and Valtteri Bottas as well in the Alfa Romeo in 10th. Good points for both of those in what was a really good battle in that mid-pack towards the end of the race.
I mean, when is that midfield battle not tight? It was, again, very competitive today. Alex Albon beating the best of the rest, I think, finishing in that position. So, it was an exciting one.
Well, it was Max Verstappen who achieved his 41st career win ahead of Alonso, Hamilton 3rd, Leclerc was 4th, Sainz 5th, Perez, Albon, Ocon, Stroll, Bottas the top 10, Piastri, Gasly, Norris, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Zhou, Magnussen, De Vries, the 18 drivers that finished, and we lost Russell and Logan Sargent from this race. Massive thank you to Oliver Askew for joining us this weekend, along with Rosanna Tent and Andrew Benson. I've been Harry Benjamin. Stephen Nolan is up next. It is up next. Stuart Clarkson will follow with the news. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.